Hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable, and relax. 3 years ago, I was looking at the local job classifieds online when one of the ads caught my eye. Not because of what it said, but because it said so little. Best I remember, the ad just read, "Job available. Good pay, no benefits. Discretion required." It then listed an email address, and that was all. At the time, I was managing a music store, but I had already started hearing rumors we would be shutting down within the next year, and the likelihood of a transfer to another store was slim. I had been morosely looking at job listings for the last few days, but this was the first one that stood out, if only because I was bored and it was weird. So I sent an email. Half an hour later, I had a response, telling me to go to a particular office building in an upscale part of the city at a precise time for my screening. I went, and after waiting for a few minutes in the lobby, I was taken into an office where I was given a series of forms and questionnaires to fill out. They collected them and told me they would be in touch. I had almost forgotten about the whole thing until a month later, I got a call saying I had moved on to the second stage of the hiring process. I was again given an address and time, and when I arrived, this time it was a different nice office park 20 miles away from the first one, I was met by a man who introduced himself as Mr. Solomon. He escorted me into a large room that contained a chair and a desk. On the desk were 2 large monitors, a keyboard and mouse, and a bolted-down metal box with 2 oversized buttons on it, one red and one green. He told me this room was a model for the place I would be working if I took the job. He described the job as follows. I would be working 7 shifts of 6 hours every week. My job would be simple. I would arrive at work 10 minutes early and enter an outer area that was like a locker room. I would have my own personal locker. I would store all belongings in the locker and change into the provided work clothes. I was never, under any circumstances, to carry any item of my own into the surveillance room. I was never, under any circumstances, to take any item with me from the surveillance room. As for what I was to do in the surveillance room, I was told that the monitor on the left would constantly show a live stream from a high-definition camera in a remote location. My job was simply to watch the camera. Once an hour, I would get onto the computer attached to the right monitor and enter a brief log describing anything interesting that occurred in the last hour. I would have no pens or pencils or paper, and I should never try to take any kind of written notes about the work. As for the red and green buttons, the red button was only to be used if there was an emergency. This meant something on the video or in my workspace that required outside help. The green button was to be hit if I saw something on the video feed that was particularly noteworthy. It would tell other people somewhere that, at least in my opinion, something interesting was going on. Solomon stressed that while I was given discretion on when to use this button, I should err on the side of only using it if and when something of real significance occurred. He pointed out the camera on the ceiling of the room we were in. He said the real room would be the same. My work would be observed, and other people were watching the room on the video feed as well. He said I was only a redundancy in case other systems failed. He then smirked and asked if I knew what he meant by redundancy. I nodded, trying not to show my irritation. I don't talk that good to people, so sometimes they think I'm dumb. That's okay. Let him think that if he paid me good enough, the pay was very good. $35 an hour. This worried me. I was already thinking this was some kind of psych experiment or secret government job, which I was okay with. But that kind of money to sit and watch a screen? My mom always told me that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is, and this was seeming too good to be true. I asked if I was going to be doing anything illegal. Solomon laughed and said no. I asked if anyone was going to get hurt. Again, he shook his head no. He said the reason they were paying so much was because they needed employees that were motivated to be professional and discreet. The work they were doing was important, and for various reasons, it couldn't be discussed. If I took the job, I would have to sign papers promising I would never discuss my work there, or I could be sued or locked up. I'm only breaking that now because of everything that's happened. So I took the job, and because they wanted me to start right away, I had to quit the store with no notice. I felt bad about that, but I was excited about the new job too. It was a lot of money and seemed like easy enough work, if a bit boring. I was nervous that there was something more to it, but I told myself I would just have to see. No point in chickening out and wasting a good chance because I let my imagination go crazy. I was given the location of the job itself, and when I went there I was amazed that it really was just like the model room I had been shown, with only a few differences. There was a locker room you had to pass through to enter the surveillance room, and there was a small bathroom attached to the real surveillance room also. The real room had a small water cooler in the corner, but because I wasn't allowed to bring anything in with me, I had to eat before or after every shift. The biggest difference, of course, was that the monitors were turned on. The right monitor was just a black and white terminal like you see in movies sometimes. I could type in my logs, but no internet to look at or anything like that. The left monitor. It was video from a room. You would call it a bedroom, I guess, because it had a bed in it, but it had lots of other stuff too. A TV, a sofa and chairs, a couple of tables, and plenty of empty space in between. The camera must be high up in a corner because I could see pretty much everything except for the far sides of furniture. At first, though, I didn't notice any of that stuff. All I saw was her. She looked to be a little older than me and was very pretty. When I first saw her, she was laying on her side on the sofa. That was the part of the room farthest from the camera, but the picture was very clear, and I could tell that she was sleeping. I found myself leaning into the monitor more so I could see her better, and then I thought about what I was doing and felt embarrassed. It's like I was spying on her. A peeping Tom, my mom used to call it. I didn't want to be a peeping Tom, but I didn't want to be silly either. I needed to think about it slow. It was a good job, and I wasn't doing anything wrong, right? I wasn't hurting anybody. The woman looked fine, and the room was nice. She probably agreed to be there, and it's all some experiment or something. I was just overreacting, so I sat down in the chair and began my work. It didn't take long before I understood more. The woman I took to calling her Rachel wasn't there of her free will. I never saw her hurt, but it was clear that she never left that room except to go into what I think is a bathroom area that my camera couldn't see. Well, she never left the room on her own. Periodically, usually a couple of times a week during my shifts, men and women in strange-looking outfits would come in and take her from the room. Sometimes she would struggle, but usually she would just go along with her head hung low. They would always bring her back, though the times when she wasn't brought back during my shift were always the worst for me. I would worry about her until I got to work the next day and saw her in the room watching TV or painting. She never looked hurt or even that upset except for when they took her, and even when she fought, they were always gentle with her. Still, I knew something was wrong. I considered quitting the job or hitting the red button and getting someone to come so I could get some answers, or calling the police and showing them what the camera was showing me. Except, I was scared. Scared of losing my job and scared of what these people might do to me if I quit or told on them. Solomon had told me when I took the job that part of being discreet was not asking questions. I would never be asked to do more than I had already been told, but I could never tell anyone what I did or saw, and I could never ask questions about what I was doing or why. So I made excuses. It was all an experiment. She was crazy or sick, and they were trying to help her. She was doing a job just like I was. Or if she really was a prisoner somewhere, at least I was watching to make sure that she was okay. If they ever tried to hurt her, or I saw that she really didn't want to be there for sure, I could get help then. In a way, I told myself, I was helping to protect her by watching. I don't expect you to think much of my excuses. I don't think much of them myself, especially now. But in my defense, when things changed, I didn't ignore it or try to explain it away. I knew something had to be done. Rachel would usually paint for an hour or two every day, and it seemed to always be during my afternoon shifts. The room had no windows as far as I could tell, but I guess she either used a clock or her own body's time to keep to a kind of schedule. I always liked to watch her paint. The thing she was painting was always facing the wrong way for me to see it, but I could see her face as she worked. She always looked peaceful and happy when she was painting, and seeing her that way, smiling serenely from time to time as she got something the way she wanted it, always made my day. I first noticed something was wrong when she started painting more frequently a few weeks ago. Her expression was more focused and serious, and there was a tension to her movements that I wasn't used to seeing. At first I thought she was just really trying to work hard on something, and I wanted to tell her not to worry. Every few weeks the others would come in and take the old paintings out anyway, bringing in a new stack of, I think the word is canvas, but it was more than her being focused. Something was wrong. She didn't look happy and she was going for hours at a time. In the span of 3 days, she had finished 4 paintings. I had been growing more and more worried watching her work, and when she finished the 4th, I found myself telling her to just stop and rest a while. I had grown accustomed to talking to the monitor, talking to her in my own way, but she didn't stop. Instead, she began moving the paintings, arranging them on the back and seat of the long sofa at the far end of the room. This was the first time I had gotten to see any of the paintings. Even when the others were taking them out, they always seemed to be turned away from the camera. I was still worried about her, but I was also happy to finally see something she had worked on, happy and amazed. They were beautiful. One was a beautiful green forest, another was an old stone well, a third was a house sitting alone on a small island. The last was an old-fashioned looking movie theater. All of them looked like something out of a dream, with trailing lines of color mixing in the air around them like leaves caught in a wind. It was only when I looked close that I realized the lines of color weren't random. They were words. Easy to miss if you weren't looking close, and by themselves they didn't seem to mean much. Just the ghost of a word somewhere in each of the paintings, easy to lose in everything else that was being shown. I leaned into the monitor and squinted, trying to read the words. Then my heart started thudding as I made them out. Blinking and rubbing my eyes, I looked again, reading them out loud in order. Left to right, top pair, then bottom. Please. Help. Me. Thomas. I pushed back from the monitor, my hand over my mouth. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how any of this could be happening. It wasn't just that she was asking for help, though that was a big part of it. It was that my name is Thomas. I thought about the camera above me and took my hand away from my face. I rolled back to the desk and sat there, trying to stop from shaking, trying to make myself take a breath. Think about it slow. The first thing was, should I hit a button? The red button was for an emergency. If she was a prisoner or something and she was trying to escape, they might think that was an emergency. But no one had been hurt that I knew of. And I think Mr. Solomon meant save that for something that was like a police or ambulance emergency. Not something like this. But what about the green button? This was definitely something noteworthy. Not only that she was asking for help, but that she was asking me for help. I made myself stop for a moment. I couldn't know for sure she was asking me. I had gone to school with several boys named Thomas. It was a common name. But the chances of her painting that name when I was working here. I didn't want to be silly, but I wasn't trying to be too... What's that word? Mom used to say it when she read her angel books. Skeptics. I didn't want to be a skeptic either. I had to believe it was probably meant for me, and that was something they would want to know. But should I hit the green button? My hands were drifting toward the metal box on the desk, but I hesitated. I didn't like breaking rules, and I was scared of what would happen if I broke these. If they really were holding her prisoner, then they were probably very bad people, but I didn't know that. Maybe they were good and she was bad, but I looked back at the monitor for the first time since reading the words. Rachel was already moving the paintings back off the sofa, as though she knew the message had been received. A canvas in each hand, she glanced up at the camera as she moved across the room, and it felt like she was looking right at me. My chest tightened as my hands moved away from the buttons. I didn't think she was bad. I had watched her for years. I felt like I knew her, would know if she was bad. Strange as it seemed, in a way she was my friend, and I was going to try and help her. I spent the rest of my shift trying to act normal and think of what to do. I knew whoever else was watching might have noticed the paintings or seen how I acted, but I couldn't worry about that. I would try to play it cool and try to think how I could help her. The only people I had actually met connected to this job were a couple of people when I filled out the papers, and then Mr. Solomon when he showed me the model room and told me the job. I had no way of contacting any of them except through the buttons. My checks were deposited electronically, and I had never run into anyone else who worked at the surveillance room. That thought made me stop a second. I had always thought it was weird that I never ran into someone when I was coming or going. The person I was taking over for, or the person who was taking over for me. I had always figured there must be other people, other surveillance rooms even, and they just scheduled us so we didn't run into each other. And I still thought there were others. Part of why I thought that was because it seemed like I wasn't the only person who used my surveillance room. The water cooler, the toilet paper, the soap, they all seemed to go down faster than I think I was using it by myself. If that was true, maybe I could figure out who they were, and maybe they would be safer to talk to than whoever it was that I worked for. I got off work at 8 that night, and instead of grabbing some food and going home, I drove my car around the block and then parked down the street from the building where I worked. Nothing had changed while I drove around for a minute. No new cars had parked or anything. And if I was right, they didn't send anyone to replace me until they were sure I was gone anyhow. So I sat and waited. I was tired and the street was pretty empty and boring, but I was too excited and scared to fall asleep. Every time a car passed or someone walked down the sidewalk, I tensed. I kept imagining a SUV or van pulling up behind me, men getting out and pulling me from my car, taking me somewhere like where they had Rachel to kill or torture me. Half a dozen times I almost cranked up and drove away, but every time I would think of her alone in that room. She had no one but me to help her, and I had to try. 2 hours later, a fat balding man parked and started heading for the building. As soon as I saw he was able to unlock the door and enter, I opened my car door to go talk to him. Then I stopped. I needed to be smart. I didn't know where they were, but I was sure there were hidden cameras in the locker room and outside the building. If I go running in there and confront that guy, they'll know for sure that I'm up to something. Sighing with frustration, I shut the door back and waited until his shift was over. I considered tailing him like in the movies, but I was scared I would just lose him, or he would call someone for help. So I waited until he was walking back to his car after a 6-hour shift, hopefully far enough away that the cameras wouldn't see. And then I met the man I came to know as Charles Jeffries. Hey man, can I talk to you for a minute? His back was to me and he just waved his hand absently without looking up. Sorry, I don't have any money. Have a good... He froze as he glanced back at me while talking. Oh God. Number, you need to get out of here, kid. We aren't allowed to talk. I could tell he was scared, but I couldn't risk letting him go yet, not after all this. I stepped up and pushed the door back shut as he was trying to get into his car. So you know who I am? I tried to not sound mean, but I could hear how mad I was in my voice. He yanked at the door again, but I was still holding it, and I was stronger than he was. After a second, weaker tug, he turned around, his face strained and tired looking. Yeah, I know who you are. You work here just like me. And I'm telling you, we aren't supposed to be talking. We aren't supposed to meet, ever. I frowned. Mr. Solomon never told me that. He never said it was one of the rules. The man shook his head. Mr. Solomon. Yeah. Well, there are plenty of rules they don't tell you. I bet they didn't tell you what you were going to be watching before you started, did they? When I just lowered my eyes, he went on. Yeah, me either. I've been at this job for 10 years. I've seen other people come and go, usually because they broke one of those rules they never mentioned. The only reason I'm still here is because I keep my head down and my mouth shut. He wagged a finger at me. You should do the same if it's not already too late. I felt my stomach curling into a cold knot. Too late? The man rubbed his face. Kid, do you think they don't know we're talking? Do you think anything happens that they don't know about? He looked back toward the building, a look of sadness and fear in his eyes. Hell, for all I know, you've already killed us both. Shaking his head, he pushed me back and started opening the door. Either way, I'm done risking it. You need to stop asking questions and just do your job. It's a lot healthier. With that, he got into his car and shut the door. I didn't try to stop him this time. Even though I had already been worried about what he was telling me, hearing it confirmed was paralyzing. What exactly was my plan? He probably didn't know any more than I did, and even if he did, what could I do with anything he told me? I walked back to my car with a heavy heart. I was still afraid, but more than that, I was sad and ashamed. I wanted to help Rachel, but I wasn't sure how. I wasn't giving up, but as I drove back to my apartment, I couldn't think of what I should do next. This wasn't a movie. I wasn't a hero. And the only ideas I had left were to either go to the police, who might be controlled by whoever I worked for, or try to get proof of her being held prisoner myself. As I parked my car and walked into my apartment building, I made a decision. Unless I thought of something better overnight, I would do both ideas. Tomorrow, I would break the rule about carrying anything in. I'd use my phone to record a video of the surveillance room of Rachel and how she was trapped somewhere, and of me telling everything else I knew. And I would email it to every newspaper, website, and internet channel I could think of. I'd then go to the police and give them a copy too, if I could make it that long without getting caught. Maybe if I did all that, even if they got me, someone would help Rachel. I was filled with worry and dread at the idea of being hurt or killed. A part of me kept saying I should just do as I was told and hope that it all went away. But I couldn't live with myself if I did that. Even if I messed up, I felt like I had to try. I was so preoccupied that I didn't hear the person coming up behind me as I unlocked my apartment door. Thomas? I turned around and felt my legs weaken as I stumbled back against my door. I had to be dreaming or crazy. I grabbed the doorknob for support as I looked at the woman in front of me. It couldn't be her, but somehow it was. Rachel? She hesitated a moment before breaking into a smile. Is that what you call me? I like it. My name is actually Melanie, though. I felt my face reddening. Of course, her name wasn't actually Rachel. That was just something I made up in my head. Still, my embarrassment couldn't keep up with my confusion and joy. Is it really you? She nodded. Yeah, it's me. Rachel, Melanie grunted as I stepped forward and started hugging her. Laughing, she hugged me back for a moment, but then she whispered in my ear, Thomas, we need to talk and not out here. Can we go inside? I broke away and nodded, wiping at my eyes as I tried to finish unlocking the door with a shaking hand. My heart was pounding and I still felt like I was in a strange and wonderful dream. But when we had gotten inside and sat down on my living room sofa, I forced myself to focus on the biggest question I had. How? Melanie had still been smiling as we sat down, but now she looked worried and sad. Thomas, that's what I'm here to tell you. Things aren't like you think they are. They never have been. I frowned, a new line of fear cutting through my happy haze. What do you mean? She held the bridge of her nose for a moment, looking down like she was trying to figure out how to say whatever it was she had to say. Thomas, you're part of a psychological experiment. I've been a part of it for longer than you have as one of the actors, and I still don't know all the details. I'm pretty sure it's run by some government agency, and I know they're investing a lot of money and time into it. But for what reasons? That I'm not so sure. I realized I was wringing my hands. No, that wasn't right. It couldn't be right. This was some kind of trick. Melanie went on. What I do know is that you're being watched as a long-term subject. They have constructed this whole scenario where you do a secret job watching someone, me, who looks like they might be trapped. They give you instructions and a way of making choices. You've got buttons or something you can choose between, right? I nodded weakly, my tongue thick in my throat. Yeah, a red one and a green one. And a green. She sighed and nodded. I think they're testing how much you'll obey, what choices you'll make based off of your morals, your intelligence, and your fear. It's interesting, or at least I thought so when I first joined up 6 years ago. They've never officially given me many details, just the overall gist. But people talk. The other actors and me, sometimes we hear things and we gossip. She smiled sadly. That's what caused me to start feeling bad. I interrupted. Other actors? Melanie's eyes widened. Oh shit, yeah, sorry, I think they still call him Mr. Solomon, and there are others too. When I just stared at her, she went on. Anyway, for a long time it was just the normal job, right? I spend 6 hours a day acting like I'm this trapped girl, mainly faking painting or watching TV. You know, boring stuff. I couldn't help but interrupt again, hating the hurt trembling in my voice. You fake the painting? You aren't really painting those wonderful pictures? Now Melanie looked embarrassed. No, sorry, I can't paint a bit. I'm a pretty good singer, though. She tried to smile, but faltered. Reaching forward, she touched my arm. That's why they always have the paintings turned where you can't see them. They're already done beforehand. All you ever see is some blank canvases and, well, when they want me to show you something. Her expression darkened as she went on. That's why I had to break the rules and contact you. When they started doing this hidden message mind game bullshit, I got worried. Worried you would take it too serious, that you could get hurt or even hurt yourself. As soon as you left your shift tonight, I talked to one of the guys in the video department. He told me about how you had reacted, showed me how you were still parked down the street from the building. I drove over. The bedroom set is in a building outside of town. I saw you sitting in your car and I almost approached you then, but I was scared of getting caught and fired. So I parked and waited until I could follow you somewhere else and let you know I was okay. She blinked back tears. I'm ashamed to say I almost left a couple of times. I don't want to lose this job, and I tried to tell myself you would be okay after a day or two. I could get them to change the script enough that you felt like I was okay and wouldn't worry too much. I felt an angry heat growing in my chest. Well, that's nice of you. She looked up, her eyes red. I know. I'm a shit. I'm so sorry. I was being selfish and cowardly, but I didn't actually leave. And then when I saw Charlie leaving the building, saw you running over to talk to him, I knew they were escalating it even further. Charlie? Melanie rolled her eyes in frustration. Shit, yeah, sorry, Charlie Jeffries, he's another actor. In an earlier version of the experiment, he actually played Mr. Solomon, but they decided he wasn't scary enough, so now he's usually in one of the suits. He's actually done that for your version a lot, you just can't recognize him under all that get-up they wear. I kept curling and uncurling my hands on my lap. It was all too much. I felt like a pinball going between anger and relief and embarrassment and confusion. So all that stuff he told me, that was all just to scare me? See how I'd react? She nodded as she sniffled and wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Yes, I'm sorry. That's why I knew I couldn't wait any longer to tell you. I could see how worried and scared you were going back to your car. I pulled my arm back from her touch. Well, thanks, I guess. At least you stopped me before I went to the police and looked like a joke in front of them, too. I just wanted her gone, her sympathetic, pitying eyes off of me. Thanks for stopping by and letting me in on it. I tried to make my voice sound hard and unfeeling, but it came out watery instead. Standing up, I turned away from her so she couldn't see as I started to cry. If you don't mind, I need time to think about everything. It's a lot. A moment passed, and then her hand was on my shoulder. Thomas, you don't have anything to be embarrassed about. They are very good at what they do. All you did was what you thought was right, because you're a good man. I shrugged. I thought that you were in trouble, and I wanted to help. She gently turned me toward her, and when I looked up, she smiled and sniffed again. I know, but you need to realize most people wouldn't have tried to help. Not when it meant giving up their job or risking themselves like that. Not for a stranger. I wiped at my face as I looked away. Well, I still feel dumb, but I'm glad it's not real. I'm glad you're okay. That we both are. I paused and caught her eye again. We are, aren't we? Safe, I mean. She hesitated before nodding. Yeah, I think so. Like I said, they have a lot invested in whatever this is, and the fact that they're willing to go as far as they have with you makes me wonder. But I've never seen any signs of anyone getting hurt. I think the worst that could happen is one or both of us gets fired. I felt my face getting red again. Oh, don't worry about that. I'm going to quit tomorrow. I'll finally get to hit their damn buttons. Maybe both of them. I started to smile, but then I saw the look on Melanie's face. Thomas, please don't do that. I don't think they would hurt us, but if you up and quit, they'll figure out I've talked to you. I don't think they watch us all the time, but I don't know what they can find out. You know, tracking cell phones, spy satellites, whatever. I'm taking a big risk just being here, and I don't want them catching on. I took a step back from her. So you want to keep getting paid to trick people like me? She reached out and grabbed my right hand. I had been clenching it unconsciously, and it relaxed at her touch. No, I don't want to, but I wasn't expecting this. How the experiment has changed. Getting to actually meet you, I can't do it long term, but another month or two to save up money. Now that you're in on it and won't be scared or hurt by it anymore. She smiled. That I can do. That we can both do. We can keep going like normal, take some more of their money, and then one of us can quit. The next month, the other one can. How does that sound? I shrugged uncertainly. It made some sense, and once I had calmed down, it would probably make more. She gave my hand a squeeze. And when this is all over, I want to get to know you better. I know I've been playing a role, but for the most part, that's been me you've been watching all this time. I think it's only fair I get to see more of you, too. She blushed. Assuming you're interested in that. I felt my hand growing clammy in hers as my stomach fluttered. Well, I mean, yeah. Yeah, I would really like that. Swallowing, I added. How long do we have to wait to see each other again? Melanie grinned at me. Work another month or so, save what you can, and then quit. I'll wait another 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll do the same. And then... She looked up at the ceiling as she pondered it for a moment, and I was struck again by how beautiful she was, even if she was a little different in person than I had imagined. 3 months from tonight, we'll meet right here. I'll come over and we can start getting to know each other better. How's that sound? Returning her smile, I nodded. That sounds great. When she left a couple of minutes later, part of me hated to see her go, but another part was relieved. I was so exhausted, and while I was so happy she was okay and we had finally met, I felt like the burned-up wire in an old light bulb. I needed time alone, time to think and calm down, and most of all, time to rest. I didn't really even remember falling asleep, and when I woke up, I realized my alarm had been buzzing for over 30 minutes. I jumped up and raced to get to my shift at work. As she had been leaving, Melanie had stressed again how we needed to act completely the same. That meant not freaking out, but it also meant not acting like everything was okay either. If I suddenly showed no signs of being worried about her, that would tip them off too. I promised, and she left after a brief hug and kiss. Remembering that now, through the haze of my tiredness the night before, it felt like a dream. Still, I went into the surveillance room with a much lighter heart. I didn't have to worry or feel guilty anymore about not helping her, and there was some satisfaction in finally pulling one over on the people that had tricked me for so long. Besides, in 3 months I would be done with this place and get to see raw Melanie again. In person, at least, because I got to watch her on the video feed as soon as I came into work. She was asleep when I first got there, and I found myself wondering if she was as tired as I still felt. When she woke up later and started reading a book, I found myself beginning to smile and had to stop myself. I should still be worried acting, not smiling like I had a crush. I had to do better so Melanie didn't get in trouble. An hour or so later, she started working on another of her paintings. Watching her work, I was amazed at how real it all looked. It was hard to see everything from my angle, but I would have sworn she had paint on those brushes and was really painting whatever was on the canvas. I found myself feeling proud of her. She really was a great actress. Not only didn't I see her giving any clues that we had met or talked, but she really did seem different in the room than she had in my apartment. I suppose that was what she had meant by playing a role. I was almost at the end of my shift, and while I hated to leave her, I had to admit that I was ready for some more sleep. Trying to guard my reactions all day had been exhausting, and I was dreading the next few weeks. But then I realized she was done painting. I expected her to just go and do something else, but instead she picked up the canvas at its edges and carefully walked it over to the sofa. Her body was blocking it at first, but then she stepped aside. It was a painting of a massive tree. The bark was a dark red with a huge twisting trunk that broke off into a dozen branches. Those branches were covered in leaves that were so deep green they almost reminded me of storm clouds more than the top of a tree. Like all the paintings, I felt touched by it, even now that Melanie had told me she didn't paint them. The images themselves, combined with the colors and the small details, they really were amazing. Just like this one. If you looked close enough, you could see that there were several small blackbirds in the branches of the tree. It was funny, but it almost looked like they were made out of words. I felt my heart start to hammer, and I forced myself to stay calm. No point in being silly. I knew it was all a game now, and I just had to play my part a little while longer. Still, the worried me would want to know what the words said, so I might as well try to read them. I squinted, following the birds right to left and top to bottom. That girl isn't me. I looked away from the painting to see Rachel staring up at me. She looked terrified. Oh no, I had to do something, and I had to do it right now. If Melanie was somehow a fake, that meant they must have sent her. And if they sent her, that meant they knew. They knew about the messages in her painting. They knew about me asking questions, and they knew I didn't hit a button during any of it. I felt panic and fear crawling up my chest, making it hard to breathe. Standing up, I started pacing, periodically glancing back at the monitor to see if Rachel could help me, tell me what I needed to do next. But she had laid down on her bed. It was hard to tell for sure with her back to the camera, but I think she was crying. No, I needed to fix this. Get her out of there. And if I didn't have a better plan, I'd just have to go with the one I already had. Feeling the hard eye of the ceiling camera on me, I went to the door and stepped back into the locker room. My phone was in my locker, and after messing up the combination the first time, I got the door open and got it out. Gripping it tightly, I tried to hold it by my side casually, but I knew there was little point. If they knew everything, I wasn't going to be able to hide anything. I just had to try and be fast, get some kind of message out to people that could help Rachel before they got to me. I opened the camera on the phone as I re-entered the surveillance room and hit record. It made a small beeping noise, and once I was sure it was recording, I turned the camera on myself. My name is Tommy, Thomas Calhoun, and my job is watching a woman trapped in a room. This is not a joke or a movie or whatever. This is real. For 3 years, my job is to sit in this room. I moved the camera slowly around the room, taking in the door to the bathroom, the water cooler, the desk with the monitors, keyboard, and button box, and watch a video feed of a woman locked up in a bedroom somewhere. I stepped closer to the desk and made sure the monitor showing Rachel was clear and in focus. I didn't know this woman was a prisoner at first, or I tricked myself into thinking she wasn't because the money was good. Either way, I know she is now. She is in danger, and so am I. After lingering on video of her for a few more seconds to make sure every detail could be seen, I turned the camera back on myself. I had to hurry or the video might be too big to send quickly. I was trying to stay calm, but I felt myself tearing up as I went on, and I did my best to keep my words clear. Please help her. I don't know where she is, I don't know who has her, because I don't know who I really work for. But they are bad people, and she is not safe. All I know is that I work at a building right outside of San Antonio. I only know the names of 2 other people connected to this place. The man who hired me, Mr. Solomon, and a man who might have a job like mine, Charlie Jeffers. No Jeffries, I think. I don't know if they are real people. I don't know if that is their real names. Please, I'm not crazy. I know how this sounds. Just come here, see the room, figure out where she is and help her. And I heard the muffled sound of the outer door opening into the locker room, and I frantically fumbled with the phone to stop the recording. How do I send? Oh no, how do I... There it is. I hit the button to share and felt a new panic rising. Who should I send it to? I had only a handful of contacts, and I just selected them all. Maybe at least one of them would take it seriously and get help. As I heard the door to the surveillance room opening behind me, I hit send. Not connected to data service or Wi-Fi. Please send again when connected. What? No. I turned to see Mr. Solomon entering the room. He was flanked by 2 large men in dark suits that looked like bodyguards or something. Raising a finger, he wagged it at me. No service in here, Thomas. But then you should never need service in here so long as you followed the rules. They took me easily. I tried to make it to the bathroom and close the door, but the 2 guards stopped me and pulled me down. They put the... what do you call them? Zip ties on my hands and feet and pulled a black bag over my head. Then I was being carried out of the room, and it felt like they must have put me in the back of a van that was pulled right up to the building. I was laying on what felt like thin, weird-smelling carpet that covered a hard metal layer underneath. I heard someone get into the van with me, and I asked where we were going. If they would just take me and let Rachel go. There was a short laugh overhead, and then Mr. Solomon's voice as he told me that he would explain everything when we got where we were going. For now, he said, I needed to relax. It was a long drive, and I would need the rest. I went to say more, but then I felt a sharp pain in my neck. They had stabbed me, or no, they injected me with something. I was feeling so strange now, but I had to stay awake. I had to try and get away. I had to... Hello again, Thomas. I blinked as I began looking around. My mouth was dry and my head hurt, but otherwise I felt okay. I wasn't tied up anymore. Instead, I was laying back on a padded table like I'd seen when I went to the doctor. But this wasn't a doctor's office. The room was large, and aside from the padded table, it held a small bed, a desk with a computer monitor on it, and a couple of chairs. Sitting in one of those chairs was Mr. Solomon. I raised up slowly, blinking at him. Where is she? Is Rachel okay? The man smiled. You really are something, Thomas. Trying to be the hero, even if you don't quite know how. I respect that. Licking his lips, he leaned forward slightly. In fact, I respect that so much that I've decided to start our new relationship with as much honesty as I'm allowed. Some of my colleagues disagree with this approach, but you know what? Fuck them. This is my project, and I think you deserve to know what's going on. Looking more serious, he stood up, lifting the gun he had been holding casually in his lap. But before we get into the details, would you like to see Rachel? I slid off the table and nodded as I caught myself from falling. My legs were still wobbly from whatever they had given me, but I barely noticed. Yes, please, let me see her, the real her. Mr. Solomon gave a small laugh and gestured toward a nearby door. Yes, reality is always best. She's just there in the next room. I stumbled my way forward, my legs getting better as I walked, and when I grabbed the doorknob, it turned easily. I expected the door to lead to her bedroom, but instead it opened into another room a lot like the one I had been in, though the stuff in it was different. Strange machines filled the walls, and in the back of the room was a large aquarium? I didn't know. It was a big cylinder taller than I was, and it was filled with some kind of gray liquid. There was a shape in that liquid. Go ahead, Thomas. Feel free to go have a good look. You've earned it. I felt my stomach clenching tighter at Mr. Solomon's words and the meanness in them. My legs felt heavy again now, but it wasn't from the drugs this time. Shuffling forward, I could see the shape was a person. Oh no, or at least a body, because it was clear from just looking at it that the person was dead. It was very well preserved, but I could see how the skin hung wrong and looked bloated in spots. Oh God. No, its hair, which had been floating like seaweed in front of its face, drifted away as I reached the glass, and I could see Rachel staring out at me. Murderer! I turned on Solomon and started to run toward him when he shot me. Suddenly I was on the ground convulsing as he stepped closer. Don't worry, Thomas, it won't kill you. Just make you unable to move much for a bit. I heard more footfalls as my body began to still. Get him up. Take him back to the other room. I could barely feel anything as I was carried back to the padded table and propped up into a sitting position. This time I was strapped down, but I guessed it was more so I didn't fall off, because I couldn't move anything other than my head, and even that just a little. I could hardly see at all for crying, but I recognized the blurry shape of Solomon sitting back down in front of me. Before you ask, well, when you are able to ask anything again, yes, that is Rachel. Not a fake Rachel, not a dummy, and not some kind of trick. As I said, the time for tricks is past. Now is the time for truth. Frowning slightly, he went on. Thomas, I understand that showing you her body that way might seem very cruel. You may hate me for it right now, I would understand it if you did. But you called me a murderer, and at least in this specific context, I think that is unfair, because I didn't kill Rachel. In truth, I've been with this aspect of the project for only 7 years. He gestured back to the door behind him. And Rachel has been dead for over 8. I felt my eyes widen as though they belonged to someone else's body. It was more lies, more tricks, all of it. Oh God, it had to be. Do you know what remote viewing is? He rolled his eyes. Sorry, right, you can't talk right now. I'll just assume you don't. Remote viewing is a broad term for the ability to see things that are far away from you physically, to know things you shouldn't be able to know through your normal 5 senses. Some describe it as a psychic ability, though there are several schools of thought as to how and why it works. His eyes fixed on mine intently. Because it does work, Thomas. Various governments and private organizations have studied it for a very long time, and while publicly it is always ridiculed as pseudoscience and foolish superstition, the reality is that some people have the innate ability, that means it comes naturally, to somehow see other places. Rachel was one of those people. She came into the program when she was 17, having been identified via a front-facing screening process that was ran as a psychological test that paid subjects well, at a time when Rachel was looking to make some money. 3 months after being identified as a good candidate, she was taken, and after the initial adjustment period, she became a largely compliant asset that quickly rose to the top of our talent pool. Solomon folded his hands on his knee. I know you cared for her, Thomas. So I think this is worth sharing. Rachel was never treated badly, other than her confinement and the occasional test that was mildly unpleasant. No, we all treasured her. She was enormously talented, not just as a remote viewer, but as an artist. That's how she would convey what she saw, you understand. She would enter into an almost trance-like state when she painted, and when she was done, she would have given us a painting of images and words that provided, well, it was very valuable information. He chuckled. If you ever wondered, that's why there was always such care that the paintings were never shown to the camera. Picking at his pants, he went on. Rachel was so talented that she was selected for a new program that we thought might greatly enhance or alter her ability. We introduced something foreign into her body. At first, nothing seemed to change. If anything, the accuracy of her remote viewing was declining, which was a problem for us and for her. But then we realized that we were reading the new paintings wrong. She was able to see more clearly than ever. She just was no longer bound to only current events. Now her sight transcended time. He paused, and I realized he was enjoying telling the story. The bastard was having a good time, pausing to make it more dramatic. I would fucking kill him. While this made some of her paintings less immediately useful, they became much more valuable as we were able to decipher them. For a time, it looked as though everything was working better than we had ever hoped. His lips thinned. And then one day she showed a painting to the camera. It said, "Please help me, Thomas." This immediately sent up all kinds of red flags. She knew not to show paintings to the camera, and now she was trying to communicate with someone. We didn't disrupt her routine, but an intensive investigation began into who she was talking to. Was it one of her handlers? One of the technicians? Someone from her past life? But nothing checked out. Leaning back in his chair, a look of pride grew on Solomon's face as he continued. I was the one that first suggested the idea that she was, intentionally or not, knowingly or not, seeing and talking to someone in the future. I was still an outside consultant at the time, but by that point we had more strange behaviors from her, including the second message painting, "That girl isn't me." If he was right, Solomon said with a thin smile, things would play out as they were meant to, regardless of what I wanted or thought I chose. Either way, he added, the video was about to start back playing and would not stop for another 5 days. Whether I wanted to spend that time getting to see her again was entirely up to me. I tried to not watch, but a part of me knew from the start I was going to. Maybe I would find some clue that they were lying about her being dead, or Rachel could give me some advice or warning about what I needed to do next. I didn't know. What I did know is that I couldn't miss the chance to see her again. And despite knowing in my heart that she was dead, and everything on the video had happened a long time ago, I still felt that by watching I was with her somehow. She had been taken away from everything she knew when she was barely grown, trapped for years just for being special, experimented on, treated like property, kept from ever having friends or family or a life. And yet through all that, she was still beautiful. Not just on the outside, but on the inside too. I had spent years watching her, getting to know her in 1,000 tiny ways that so few people ever truly know each other. I had seen her kindness and grace in her actions, even when she was fighting against the people holding her. I had watched her strength when she woke up day after day in her prison and never gave up. And I saw the beauty of her soul in her paintings, full of swirling colors and, what was the word? Wonder. She was able to paint these things she saw with such care and love, despite living in a world that had abandoned her so completely. Well, I wasn't abandoning her. I would watch every bit of the video I could manage, try to burn into my memory every frame of her I saw, not for them and their stupid project, but for me and for her. I may not have much left to do in my life before they lock me away somewhere or kill me, but I could do this one last thing. Rachel wouldn't die alone. I watched nearly all of it, stopping only to eat quickly and use the bathroom until the last 2 days. I would ask the guards to pause it, but they would only shake their heads and say Solomon said it had to play normally until it was finished. By the 4th day, I was in a stupor. I had already dozed some the first 3 days, but when I woke up on the 4th day, I could tell a few hours had passed. There were 2 trays of food on the bed, one breakfast and another lunch. I looked back at the screen in a panic, worrying I had missed something, but Rachel seemed to be just waking up too. I noticed her putting her hand to her stomach as she got out of bed and felt my own stomach twist. She was already hurting. Rachel glanced at the camera and tried to smile before moving to set up a new canvas for painting. This was the second of 3 paintings she did in those last days. The first had been the inside of an old-fashioned movie theater from the viewpoint of someone sitting in a back row. On the movie screen was just the image of a sledgehammer propped against a brick wall. I didn't understand what it meant, and I found myself scanning the picture for some message or other clue. Eventually I found what might be one, though I didn't understand it either. Rachel must have come to understand they knew what she was doing with the paintings and didn't want to stop her, because these last 3 she set up much closer to the camera. I was still squinting and studying the painting closely when I realized the flipped-up seats in the next row up had brass number plates along the front edge of the seats. Though they were upside down from the viewpoint of the painting, the angle was good enough that once I noticed them, I was able to read them. 243-2689. I didn't understand any of it, but I committed it all to memory, focusing all my attention on the painting until she finally took it away. Even that early on, I could tell painting was taking a lot out of her now, and like I had for so long, I found myself talking to her, telling her to go rest before I remembered her body in the next room. I almost stopped then, but no. Maybe she couldn't tell I was talking to her, or maybe she could. Either way, me talking to her couldn't hurt, and it made me feel a little less lonely and sad as I watched her. The second painting, The one she started after I woke up from falling asleep for a few hours was stranger than the rest. It looked like it was in a room with curved walls made of tree roots, and in the center of the room was a little table made out of the same stuff. Some of the roots around the room were a deep red, but other parts, including the table thing, looked burned and black. I looked closer and saw that I could see a person's shadow over the table, hands holding some long oval-shaped bundle. I studied it for a long time, going over it again and again in my mind after she took it away. I couldn't make sense of it, of any of it. I wasn't smart enough, and I was failing her. Rachel slept for a long time after that painting. Then she got up on the 5th day, her last day, and immediately started working again. This time she was painting faster, and while I saw her wince occasionally, she never lost her look of determination as she slashed lines and colors across the canvas. When she was done, Rachel picked up the painting and turned it toward the camera, giving me a small, tired smile as she was blocked from view. It was looking out from the front porch of a house somewhere. It was out in the country, and the morning view of the yard and the land beyond were wonderful. But closer up, the painting was of two hands, holding onto each other tightly. Their interlocked fingers seemed to glow red and orange in the light of the rising sun. I found myself crying as I looked at it. Part of it was because I didn't know what it meant, and I felt a growing sense of desperation at the thought that Rachel's last works might be wasted on me. Part was because I knew it had been 5 days, and I could sense I was close to the end, to her end. But there was something more to it than all that, too. The last painting, even with everything else in my head and my heart pulling me down, gave me hope. Hope of what, I didn't know. But I started to think that maybe the only message Rachel had for me in that last painting was that somehow, somewhere, everything would be okay. Outside the edge of the painting, I could see motion in the room, people hurriedly coming in with some kind of medical equipment, and then the monitor went black. "You've done well, Thomas. Very, very well." For the last 5 days of video, we had charted 1,047 micro-variations in Rachel's behavior that we believed might correspond to your behavior, your reactions, and your emotional states while watching the video. Like before, the two of you remained in sync as though you were in the same room. It really is remarkable. I sat staring at Solomon. I listened to what he said, but I didn't care. I just wanted it over. Whatever this was, I just wanted it over. Clearing his throat, he went on. "That's why we've decided to move the implant from Rachel's body to your own. That's one of the many reasons we've preserved her so. The foreign body was still showing signs of life all this time, but just barely, and we were afraid to attempt removal. Our hope is that, given your connection to Rachel, it will accept you. Perhaps even thrive in you more than it ever did our girl." I was suddenly on my feet, and it was only the raising of Solomon's gun that stopped me from attacking him. "Don't you fucking talk about her like that. Like any of you gave a shit about her. I'll fucking kill you." Solomon's face darkened slightly as his lips thinned. "No, you won't. But if idle threats make you feel better, go ahead. It will only make things harder, not easier." Feeling a stab of panicked fear, I sat back down. "What is this thing you're going to put in me?" The man looked at me for several seconds before responding. "I'm tempted not to tell you after your stupid and frankly hurtful outburst, but I'll be the bigger person." Letting out a small sigh, he went on. "Thomas, somewhere there is a tree, a very special tree. We suspect it is the same tree that Rachel painted for you that time, though we cannot say for sure, as we have never been able to find it. It is either hidden away very well, or it is able to hide itself from those it wishes." I just looked at him, trying to kill him by just wanting it to be so. In any case, we have the next best thing, an ancient clipping from the tree, secured at great cost and sacrifice, and studied for a long time without much success. We have, however, in recent years been given advice that this clipping could be grown in the right soil. We thought that soil was Rachel, but while it did develop further inside of her, she died before the necessary growth was finished. Leaning forward, he smiled at me. "We have it on fairly good authority, however, that you might succeed where she failed. I fought them when they came, but it didn't matter. I woke up sometime later with a dull ache in my chest and a small, already healing scar on my upper stomach. I didn't really feel that different other than the little bit of pain, but I knew that would change with time. Maybe I had more time than Rachel, or maybe I had less. It didn't matter. Wait, what was that? There was some kind of soft voice. Coming from where? It wasn't in the room, it was in my head. I felt a thrill of excitement. Maybe this was Rachel's voice. She had somehow stayed in the tree thing they had put inside me. But no, I had never heard Rachel's voice, but I sensed this wasn't it. This voice was too delicate to really be heard or understood, and it reminded me of music coming from a distant room that you felt in the back of your mind without realizing it. It was a melody, a kind of song, but it wasn't Rachel's song. I realized with a shiver that it was the song of the thing inside of me. At first I was afraid, but that didn't last long. It wasn't trying to hurt me, it was trapped here just like I was. But it started to sing, it was time for us to be free. I stood up and walked to the door, and as I did so, the lights went out. The door in front of me clicked, and when I reached out and turned the knob in the dark, it opened easily. How was this possible? And if it could do this, why hadn't it helped Rachel get out? There was no answer, but there was also no time. I could already hear boots around the corner as the glow from flashlights began to light up the far end of the hall. They would drag me back in there, chain me up, or take this thing back out of me before we could get away. If I was ever going to get out, it had to be now. The voice was singing again, pushing me to go further into the dark, to run until we were safe. So I listened and I ran. Every door unlocked for me. Every turn kept me barely out of sight. The people looking for me were barking orders over a radio, asking someone what was the holdup on the generator kicking on. Whatever the response, the hallways stayed dark as I drifted through them, blind but not falling, lost but not being found. When I reached the final door, I opened it into a bright afternoon. My lungs burned a little at the first fresh, unrecycled air I had breathed in a week. Blinking, I waited for the voice to tell me where to go, but it had fallen silent. I closed the door as panic began to rise in my chest. All this, and I would get caught because I didn't know where to go. I was outside a plain brown building in the middle of nowhere. There was a road going off to the right, and to the left there was Rachel's forest from her first painting to me. I knew it was the same forest immediately, and not just because of it matching the painting so closely. I had some strange sense that felt like a kind of magnetism, or how birds know which way to fly. Looking around for a second, I felt like I was being pulled when I looked again at those woods. This was right. Somehow I knew this was the way I needed to go. So I went. I had made it to the edge of the forest when I heard the noise of men coming outside the building. I thought about hiding, but I knew it was a bad idea. They would just catch me, and I felt a drive to go deeper into the woods. I plunged ahead, running at close to a reckless speed but never tripping or stumbling as I went. I would occasionally hear a noise behind me as they spread out to search, but the sounds grew fainter as I ran. I almost thought I had lost them for good when I heard a short cough that was quickly muffled off to my left. Someone had gotten close without me knowing it. Panicking, I looked for any places I could hide. There were only bushes and trees, and over there, a well. Not just a well, but Rachel's well, with the same worn gray stone walls capped with a weathered wooden lid. I felt a moment of happy recognition, but then it faded away. How did that help? They'd check the well if they found it, and I didn't have any way to get down in it without getting hurt or stuck. Then an idea stuck me. Crouching low and staying to the brush, I moved to the well and gingerly pushed on the lid. At first it resisted, but when I pushed a bit harder, the wooden circle slid aside enough that you could clearly see someone moved it. Glancing around, I eased back into the bushes as I heard soft footfalls approaching. We need to check this out. You think he went down the well? Better hope not. He probably broke his neck if he did, and then it's our asses. I could see the two men approaching. Both of them were wearing dark body armor and carried assault rifles. The older of the two shrugged back at the other one. Better that than he was hiding in there and we didn't check. Looking irritated, the younger man nodded. I'll look. He went over to the well and shoved the wooden lid aside, causing it to clatter to the ground. Hitting a button on his rifle, a flashlight sprang to life on the barrel. He started to shine it down into the well as the other continued to look in every direction. I was worried he would see me if I moved, but I couldn't wait. I just had to stay calm. Think slow and move fast. I kept expecting to hear them yell or feel something or someone strike me in the back, but nothing came. As the afternoon light began to dim, I saw the trees thinning ahead. I was approaching a road. It looked like a normal public road too, with several cars passing one way or the other as I walked out of the forest and up the hill to the asphalt. The idea of hitchhiking, especially this close to where they held me, was frightening, but I saw little choice. I was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt they had given me and my own shoes, but I had no money or ID or phone. My only chance was to get far enough away that I could try and get help. I jumped slightly at the hiss of hydraulic brakes as a large semi rolled to a stop next to me. The passenger window rolled down and an older man with white hair and a graying mustache leaned over and peered down at me. "You look lost, son. You need a ride?" I looked down at the door of the truck. It had a logo that said Martinez & Sons Construction and Hauling. Below it was a cartoon man hitting a wall with a sledgehammer. Looking back up, I smiled at him. "Yes, sir, I do." I woke up 5 hours later as we pulled into a truck stop somewhere in Nevada. I had planned on staying awake the entire trip, but that had only lasted a few minutes before exhaustion overtook me. I glanced over at Oliver Martinez and he gave me a toothy grin. "I'm tired, but you were plumb tuckered out. I've got to fuel up, shower, and get some grub. I'm going on to California after that. If you want to ride further, just be back here in an hour. Sound good?" I nodded and thanked him again for the ride as I got out. I felt groggy from sleeping, but otherwise okay. I just needed to decide whether this was a good spot to ask for help, or if I should ride with Martinez further. He seemed like a very nice guy, and he would probably try to help if he could, but I wanted to avoid putting more people in danger if I could help it. Looking around, I saw we were in a fairly nice little town. I decided I would go look around for a few minutes and then decide what to do. I was only 3 blocks down the street when I saw the flickering lights in the distance. It was a movie theater. As I got closer, I felt my chest tightening. It was the one from Rachel's painting. "Hey there, welcome to the Phoenix." The guy standing at the candy counter of the theater looked a little younger than me, and while he seemed friendly enough, he also looked slightly concerned. "If you're here for the horror double feature, I'm afraid the second movie is about 30 minutes in. I can give you a half rate if you want to see it, though." I shook my head and tried to not look as strange and crazy as I felt. "No, that's okay. I recognized this place from a picture a friend of mine painted, so I came in to ask if you knew anything about her." He raised his eyebrows and shrugged. "Okay, weird." He smiled and added, "Weird but interesting. Who is she?" I swallowed. "Her name is, well, it was Rachel Donovan." I expected him to look surprised or excited or angry, but I could see right away the name meant nothing to him. Shaking his head, he shrugged again. "Sorry, that doesn't ring a bell. I'd say you could ask the owner, but he's on vacation this week." Nodding, I searched my mind for something else to ask, some way to make this place matter the way her other paintings had. "Is there anything unique about this place then, its history or something?" The man grinned. "Buddy, you're clearly not from here. This place is super boring. Not just the theater, but the whole town." Frowning in thought, he added, "The only thing I know about the history of this place is that there used to be a house here that burned down. This was like in the 1920s or 30s when this wasn't even a part of town. Couldn't tell you the first thing about it beyond that, but I still bet it's the most interesting thing that's ever happened here." I let out a disappointed sigh. "Okay, well, thanks." I turned to leave when the guy called out again. "Hey man, sorry I couldn't help more. If you come back, I'll get you a discount on a movie. Half off. If I'm not working, tell them Marshall said it was okay." I waved and tried to smile as I headed for the door with a heavy heart. "Why did you lead me here, Rachel? What's here that will help?" I was outside again, staring up at the theater's bright blinking signs as though they were going to give me some kind of secret signal, when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. There was an alley that ran alongside the theater and went behind it to something. Whatever was back there, the light of a distant security lamp cast shadows along the wall of the alley, and those shadows were moving. Instead of feeling afraid, I felt excited as I started down the alley. Rachel had led me here, and I just had to trust that there was a reason for it. Keep looking until the shadows were made by leaves blowing in some wind I couldn't feel. As I got to the far end of the alley, I saw there was a small backyard behind the theater surrounded by a chain-link fence, and on the other side of that fence was the tree from Rachel's painting, with its deep red twisting bark and foam of green leaves waving to and fro in the night air. I felt a surge of warmth in my chest as the distant singing began again. This was the place, the special tree that could not be found unless it wanted you to find it. It sat at the edge of a small overgrown lot surrounded on all sides by buildings and yards, somehow forgotten when whatever this land had once been was divided up. and despite its location, I had a strong sense that I was the first to see it in a very long time. Climbing the fence, I felt a jagged wire dig into my leg and rip my pants as I fell over the top. I was bleeding a little, but I hardly noticed. I could smell the tree now, and it was a rich, good smell unlike any I had smelled before. Reaching out to it, I felt the singing grow louder as I touched it. I felt stronger and less afraid then, and when I saw the light opening up at its roots, I didn't tremble, I smiled. There was a hidden tunnel under the tree, a tunnel filled with sweet-smelling air that was like the tree smell but also different. And the tunnel wasn't dark. No, not at all. It glowed with its own golden light that called to me, urged me forward. Rain was beginning to fall as I looked around the dark lot. I had the thought that I was leaving this world behind, and I found I didn't mind that much at all. The tunnel had continued to grow, slanting down gently and tall enough that I walked in without stooping. The roots of the tree went on, woven through the dirt walls as I went deeper. I looked back and saw the tunnel had closed behind me, but I wasn't surprised. The way forward was the only way that mattered. I walked for what might have been hours, but I never felt tired or hungry, and I never worried I was lost, though I had no idea where I was or where I was going. Still, I felt a surge of happiness and excitement when I turned a corner and saw something in the tunnel ahead. As I got closer, I realized it was a brick wall, but just as I began to think I had found a dead end, the wall faded away, revealing a dark room. I paused at the edge of the tunnel, looking out at the floor of what looked like a basement. It was empty, but in the light from the tree I could make out something scratched into the floor. It was the number 2. I felt my pulse quicken as I thought back to Rachel's painting with the theater seats, and then I stepped out into the room. It was the empty basement of a house, and as I went up the stairs and opened the door, I saw that the rest of the house was empty as well. No lights were on, but bright sunlight poured in through every window, and in the distance I could hear what sounded like small waves crashing on a beach. I wanted to go out and see where I was, but I forced myself to check the house first for any people or clues. But there were none. The house was utterly bare of any sign of people other than the number scratched into the floor below. My nose tingled with salty air as I stepped outside. The house was near the beach on what I soon figured out was a small, deserted island, and I realized with little surprise that I recognized the house from Rachel's painting. As I stepped off the porch, I saw no signs of people, but I wasn't entirely alone, because sitting some distance from the house was the tree. I knew it couldn't be the same tree as in the abandoned lot, but at the same time I knew that it was, or at least a different part of the same tree that made the tunnels and appeared in my old world, and whatever place this was. Because I had started having that thought as soon as I stepped out of the house. I didn't think this was my world. Not exactly. I could see a larger island some distance away, and it might have people on it. Hotels and cars and planes. Or it might not, as those things might not exist here. Either way, my newfound intuition was growing stronger, and I could tell that what was it called? No, the texture of things was different somehow, if only a little. Not bad or scary, just different. Still, after a couple of hours exploring the island and checking the house, I began to feel terribly lonely, even with the tree nearby. I decided to go back into the tunnel and keep going. The basement wall faded away as I walked up to it, and I entered the tunnels again. It was only a short time later that I found my second version of the house. Much like the first, the wall faded away into a basement, but this one was far from empty. It was a workshop of some kind, full of tools I wasn't familiar with. I glanced down and saw 43 scratched onto the floor. Who was doing that? And why? I was going to explore the house more carefully this time, as it looked like there were people here. But then I froze. Propped against the brick wall next to a small stack of boards was a sledgehammer. Trying to be quiet, I crept over and picked it up before heading back into the tunnel. When I was little, before Daddy died, he had loved to hunt. I never went with him and didn't remember much of what he hunted, but I do know he had an old hound he'd had since before I was born. The dog had only loved him, well, him and being on the trail of something. When Rocker, his name was Rockefeller, got a scent, it was like he was in a trance. He would go and go, this way and that, and to look at him, it looked like he was having a fit, both lost and certain at the same time. But whatever Rocker knew or didn't know, he always found what he was looking for. I felt like Rocker now. I was moving faster and faster as I went down this turn and that. I felt like I was on the trail of something or traveling on memories I didn't have. Gripping the sledgehammer tightly, I could hear the rising hum of the distant music in my head as I turned the last corner, and then it fell silent. There was another brick wall, and as I approached, it fell away. It was another basement room, but this one was much smaller. It contained a table, a clothes chest, and an old metal bed that had been broken apart. At the far brick wall, a woman was using one of the metal legs from the bed to attack the wall, and whatever lay behind it. I felt my head began to swim as I looked at her from behind, and as she turned to look at me, eyes wide with surprise and fear, I felt the sledgehammer slip from my grip as I stumbled back against the now solid wall. I could barely breathe at all, but I managed to get out a single word. "Rachel?" The woman looked at me, her expression less fearful but still guarded. She had the bed leg partially raised in warning. "Yeah, do I know you?" It was her, but it wasn't, much like the tree on the island. This Rachel looked a few years older, and while she looked stressed and confused at the moment, her eyes didn't seem weighted down by the same quiet sadness I had come to recognize watching the other Rachel for all that time. Still, I didn't know how to answer her question and not sound creepy or crazy. I stared at her for a second, floundering, when she asked another. "You came out of the tree tunnel, right?" I nodded, grateful for something I could answer easily. "Studying me," she said. "Where did you come from? Before the tunnel, I mean." I flushed as I tried to think of the right words. Well, I came from Texas originally, I mean." She grinned at me for a second before catching herself and trying to look serious again. "Yeah, okay, but do you know how the tree works? How did you find out about the tunnel? How did you get here?" Sighing, I rubbed my head and just started into it. "Look, I know this will sound crazy, but I had a job watching a woman trapped in a room, and that woman was you, or another version of you, and she asked me for help, and I couldn't help her, and then they took me, and I found out she had been dead for a long time, but could see me in the future, and then they put something from the tree in me that had been in her that killed her. And then I escaped, and then I figured out where to go to find the tree from things she had painted. And I somehow knew how to go in the tunnels to find different spots, and I'm pretty sure the tunnels lead to different worlds, and I got this sledgehammer, and then I... Hold up. Goddamn. Take a breath. You're going to pass out." She was smiling again, and this time she didn't try to hide it. She looked over what was left of the bed to where the sledgehammer was laying on the floor. "And did you say sledgehammer?" Whack. "So yeah, I believe you." Whack. "I've been in those tunnels too. My ex-boyfriend tricked me into moving here so he could tie me to the tree in his place." Whack. "Well, not tie me to the tree literally. Take his place as... What? The tree's buddy or something? I don't really know. It's all pretty fucked up and I don't understand all of it." Whack. "But what I do understand is that the fucker walled me up in here. At first I thought I could just pry loose some bricks over time, but nope. He put a layer of concrete on the outside this time, good old Phil, or Justin, or whatever. I mainly think of him as fuckface now." Whack. "This is taking forever." I stepped up and put my hand on the sledgehammer. "Let me do it for a bit. We can take turns." We had cleared away even more brick than she had already managed, but the concrete wall was only starting to show small cracks. I wanted to just keep looking at her, have her talk to me, but I knew she was tired. She nodded reluctantly and let go of the hammer. Before I swung, I looked back at her. "How long have you been in here like this?" Whack. Rachel scowled. "It's hard to say for sure, but I think about 8 months." I let the hammer drop down again as my eyes widened. "How did you survive all that time?" Her scowl deepened. "It's the tree. It won't let me die. I just dip into the tunnel every day for a bit, and I never get that hungry or thirsty." A thought occurred to me then. "Why didn't you just escape through the tunnels?" She quickly shook her head. "No, thank you. I've had enough of seeing other worlds. Some of them aren't so nice. And I don't want to be more tied to the tree than I already am. I just want out of here, into my own world. And then I can try and figure out how to get free of my connection to the tree for good." Rachel shrugged. "I would have done it eventually with the stupid bed parts, but who knows how long it would have taken." She smiled again. "I'm very happy you came to help and brought a sledgehammer with you." Returning her smile, I nodded as I lifted the hammer again. "Me too." Whack. We were both wringing with sweat when we crawled through the hole we'd made in the outer wall. Rachel told me that she thought her ex-boyfriend was long gone, but she couldn't be sure, so we had to be careful. Grabbing the sledgehammer from inside the room, we made our way toward the stairs. The house was decorated but quiet, and we saw no sign of anyone as we walked to the front door and opened it. Outside, the sun was coming up on a new day, and as we walked out onto the porch, I jumped a little as Rachel took my hand and gave it a squeeze. I looked over at her. I hadn't been able to help the other Rachel, but maybe that had never been the point at all, because I thought now she had been able to see more than just other places or the future. She had been able to see into other worlds and possibilities, like this one, where another version of her was trapped and needed help, a place where I wouldn't be hunted and she could be free. In the end, even when she knew she was dying, Rachel had been determined to help us be together and happy. The morning sun painted beautiful colors on Rachel's face, and looking into her eyes, I saw how much she was like the woman I had watched and cared about and tried to save. The woman who, in the end, had saved me instead. I wanted to tell Rachel so many things, ask her so many questions, but all that could come later. Squeezing her hand back, I walked with her away from the house. For now, this was enough. Not long ago, my mother stumbled upon a forgotten treasure trove of old videotapes, relics from my childhood circa 1990. Her excitement was palpable as she brought them to a photography store, eager to have the man behind the counter virtualize them, her words, not mine, and transfer their contents onto a sleek, modern pen drive. It struck me as absurdly poetic. Hours of clunky analog memories distilled into a device small enough to lose between the couch cushions. The day she retrieved her tiny time capsule, she called me with the enthusiasm of someone unveiling a long-lost artifact. She suggested we meet for tea and watch the tapes together. I hesitated. Nostalgia for me has always been a double-edged sword. Old photos, childhood anecdotes, they tend to make me wince more than smile. But her excitement was genuine, almost contagious. So despite my reluctance, I agreed. If nothing else, it seemed like a small price to pay to make her happy. When I arrived, she greeted me with a warm smile and a hug, the kind that felt like coming home. The scent of freshly brewed tea wafted through the air as she ushered me inside, handing me a tray of pastries she'd picked up from the bakery. "Set the table," she said, her voice light and full of purpose, as though this little ritual mattered more than it usually would. I obliged, arranging the sweet treats while she poured tea into delicate cups that had probably seen fewer family gatherings than they deserved. We sat together, savoring the spread she had so thoughtfully prepared, and the conversation naturally turned to my dad. His new job had taken him north to the United States, a world away. We both admitted we missed him. He'd been traveling back and forth, spending 3 months abroad at a time, and the distance felt heavier with every trip. Even the phone calls, brief and sporadic as they were, felt more like placeholders than real moments shared. At some point, I asked if she'd told my sister about the tapes. She shrugged with a nonchalant smile, the kind that only partially hides a deeper thought. "There aren't many of her," she admitted softly. "I wanted to show you first, just the two of us." There was something in her tone, an intimacy, a quiet sense of importance, that made me feel like this moment wasn't just about the tapes, it was about us. Before I could finish my second cup of tea, my mother clapped her hands with the eagerness of someone who had waited long enough. "Time to watch the tapes," she announced, her excitement spilling over. "You can finish your tea on the sofa." There was no arguing with her, so I followed her lead, carrying my cup as we moved to the living room. Setting up the TV was straightforward, though she hovered beside me, fussing over the details as if the pen drive held the secrets of the universe. I slid the tiny device into the port and took the remote, scrolling through the files that appeared on the screen. There were 7 in total, each unnamed and numbered in the order they had been filmed. No titles, no clues, just raw, unfiltered memories waiting to be unearthed. We started naturally with file number 1. My mother settled beside me on the sofa, her eyes bright with anticipation. The screen flickered to life, revealing nothing but a black void. The display indicated the clip was 3 minutes long, but there was no image, only darkness. Then came the sound, heavy, uneven breathing, and the faint crunch of footsteps on dry leaves, branches snapping underfoot. It sounded like someone walking through the woods, their breaths growing more labored with each step. I glanced at my mother. The excitement that had lit up her face only moments ago had vanished, replaced by a puzzled frown. "Skip ahead a bit," she suggested, her voice uneasy. I obliged, pressing the button to jump forward a few seconds, but nothing changed. The screen remained dark, the footsteps continued, and the breathing grew heavier, almost gasping now. It was then that I realized it wasn't just breathing. It was a woman. You could hear it in the way the sounds caught and faltered, like someone on the edge of tears. "Did you record this?" I asked her, my voice low. She shook her head slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line, then raised a finger to her mouth, urging me to stay quiet. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, her expression tense, almost as if she were holding her breath. And then, just before the clip ended, the sobbing began. It was soft, restrained, like whoever was recording didn't want to be heard. I could tell they were trying to speak. There were faint, broken attempts at words, but nothing coherent came out, just muffled gasps swallowed by silence. My mother gripped the edge of the sofa, her knuckles white, but she said nothing. The screen cut abruptly, and for a moment, the room felt impossibly still. Then, as if nothing unusual had happened, a new video began to play. My 4th birthday. The bright, joyful chaos of a child's party filled the screen, but neither of us moved. We just sat there, caught between confusion and unease, trying to make sense of what we had just witnessed. When the last video ended, my mom and I sat in silence. The room felt heavy, though neither of us said a word. After a moment, I remembered the tea in my hands and took a sip, only to grimace at its coldness. My mother noticed immediately, her eyes flicking to the cup. "Do you want me to heat that up?" she asked. But before I could answer, she had already taken it from my hands and disappeared into the kitchen. I followed her, the silence still hanging between us like an unspoken question. Leaning against the doorway, I asked the thing that had been circling in my mind. "What do you think that first video was?" She paused, glancing at me as she set the cup in the microwave. For a moment, her expression was unreadable, but then she smiled. A light, dismissive smile, as though brushing away a stray thought. "Oh, it was probably some mistake," she said with a wave of her hand. "The man at the store must have put it on the pen drive by accident. I'll go ask him about it tomorrow." Her tone was casual, practiced even, but I couldn't tell if it was meant to reassure me or herself. The microwave beeped and she pulled the cup out, cradling it as if the warmth in her hands might soothe her own unease. "What did you think of the other videos?" she asked, her voice softening as she handed me the tea. "You were such a pretty little girl back then. Oh, how I miss those times." Her words hung in the air, but my mind lingered on the video, on the sound of that woman's breaths and sobs. My mom's attempt to steer the conversation elsewhere didn't feel wrong, but it didn't feel right either. I sipped my tea and nodded, letting her nostalgia fill the silence, though the unease from that first video remained, quietly gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. By the time I left my mother's house, the sky was fading into dusk, the air carrying the weight of an ending day. Before I stepped out, I asked her if I could take the pen drive with me to show it to my husband. She smiled and handed me a second one. "I had a copy made for you," she said. "It was always meant to be yours." When I arrived home, the house was quiet, still bathed in the soft glow of evening. I set my bag down and went straight to my laptop, eager to revisit the tapes, though the memory of that first video lingered uneasily in my mind. As the laptop hummed to life, I slid the pen drive into its port, expecting nothing more than what I'd already seen. But as the files loaded, something new caught my eye. A second folder, one that hadn't shown up on the TV. My curiosity piqued. I clicked on it. Inside were a handful of corrupted documents, files with strange, unreadable names, and a single video. My heart quickened as I hovered over it, the unease from earlier stirring again. I clicked, and the screen opened, dark and familiar. Like the first video from my mother's house, the image was nothing but blackness, but the sound told a different story. The woman's sobbing was more frantic now, her breaths harsh and desperate. The cracks of branches beneath her feet came faster, sharper, as if she were running. Then came the rain, soft at first, then heavier, joined by the low rumble of thunder. The atmosphere thickened, the soundscape alive with tension. And then out of the void, a flash of light. A bolt of lightning struck a tree, illuminating the screen for a fleeting moment. I froze, my finger hovering over the keyboard. Without thinking, I hit pause. The stillness that followed was deafening. My eyes stayed fixed on the screen, the ghostly outline of the illuminated tree burned into my vision. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Something about that single frame felt too real, too deliberate. And for the first time that night, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep watching. I steeled myself and pressed play. The burning tree remained in the frame, its flames casting flickering shadows that gave the scene an eerie semblance of life. The camera swayed erratically, capturing glimpses of the turbulent sky above and the muddy ground below. It felt chaotic, disorienting, like watching through the eyes of someone barely holding on. Then came the roar, a deep guttural sound that reverberated through the speakers and into my chest. It wasn't human, and whatever it was, it drove the woman into a desperate sprint. Her sobs turned to frantic cries, her voice trembling as she murmured something about God under her breath. The words were too soft to catch, but their despair was unmistakable. A deafening boom rang out, an explosion so jarring that it made me flinch. The woman stumbled, her breathing ragged as the camera tilted violently, and then she fell. The screen glitched, the image fragmenting into streaks of static, but when it cleared, the camera had landed on the ground, its lens now pointing directly at her. I couldn't see her face, only the back of her head, her short brown hair matted with rain and dirt. She crawled toward the camera, her trembling fingers brushing against its edges. Then, just as she reached for it, she whispered something. A single word. My heart sank like a stone, my chest tightening as if the air had been sucked from the room. A strange weightlessness took over my body, and I became hyper-aware of everything around me. The soft hum of my laptop, the ticking of the clock, even the faint rustle of leaves outside the window. But I couldn't move. My limbs felt disconnected from my will, my mind too consumed by what I had just witnessed. I couldn't blink. I couldn't breathe. I was frozen in that moment, trapped by a fear I didn't fully understand. It wasn't just the video, it was the way it had burrowed into my mind, unraveling something deep within me. I wanted to look away, to close the laptop, to do anything to break free from the paralysis that gripped me. But I didn't. Or perhaps I didn't want to. Something about the stillness, the helplessness, kept me tethered to that screen, as if moving would shatter the fragile veil between reality and whatever dark truth I had just glimpsed. Then a single thought pierced through the haze of fear and confusion. It cut through the stillness like a blade, sharp and undeniable. She said my name. I think I am suffering from some mental health disorder. I must be, or else nobody could explain the strange events occurring to me. I have no living relatives except for my newly married husband. I loved him. Sorry, I love him. But some very simple things have been upon my nerves. Our marriage was very simple, as very few people attended. We moved in a new house. The first weird thing I noticed is our family was very much not that bonded. I don't know whether you can understand. Our family consists of me, my husband, his sister. We are residing in his house. The woman he calls his sister looks like very much unrelated. I can easily say someone is adopted. They look not a bit related. But this is not the problem. My husband and his sister knows nothing at each other. Once she was cooking a meal and added something which is not good with my husband's stomach. She says she forget it. I didn't meddle with that matter anymore. I let it go. Jay, husband, said they were orphans as their parents died in a tragic accident. I was speaking with Lily, sister, when she said that she can't stop worrying of her parents whenever she see a pneumonia patient. I asked why. She looked at me like, I am a stranger sitting in her house saying that pneumonia killed her parents. Now I am totally paranoid. Why would Jay lie on such a thing? Or Lily is a stranger in the family. On the same evening, I heard both of them fighting and blaming each other for something. On the next day, I pressed the matter about Lily saying the wrong reason for her parents' death. Jay gave me a blank expression, saying that she was not in her mind as she was tripping or something. I am not a child to believe in that shit. Something is wrong with this family. Some days later, I asked some family photos of them. Jay deliberately avoided me when I asked that. There would be no phone call I would hear, but he went for speaking a call. Finally, I demanded him to give something. He showed a photo after a few hours, which I am, now convinced, does not look a bit like my husband nor his sister. I see two little young children. They are blonde, of course, but nothing matches than anything that. Children do grow, but this is unnatural. How can their face change like this? Whenever I try to leave the house for anything, Jay tries to stop me. He does all the shopping. He makes sure that I don't have any reasons to leave the house. Even if it's for a walk, he says that evening isn't safe or the weather isn't that good. I really don't know whether I'm paranoid. The weirdest part is whenever we have sex, I feel like someone is watching us. I said it to my husband several times, but he never listens. But this time I finally proved it. While we were having sex, I stopped him in the middle, covered my body with a towel, and opened the bedroom door to get Lily hearing us. She was scared that I found her. My husband was genuinely shocked, or that is what I believe. We had a fight to send her sister out of the house. I became mad and came to the other room. I was now very much disturbed with the activities of my husband and her so-called sister. Something was really off. I could feel it. An eerie, shady thing is going on my back. I can't complain it to authorities as nothing has been done illegal, but at that moment I thought of doing some strange thing. I never really know about my husband's past, and he never opens up. So I started researching his name, face all over the internet to get some clues about his life. It was really strange to search for someone's information about personal life when they are 24/7 with you. Nothing useful turned up. Finally, I used Google Lens to upload Jay's picture. At that time, I didn't know it will give chills down my spine. I searched all the results. Nothing was related. I felt like I went to the end of the internet. When I decided to give up, I saw something which made my blood froze. It was a news article of a car accident which killed young lovers. As I scrolled down, I realized the young lovers they were speaking about is my dear husband and his sister, who was dead 5 years ago in a secluded town, according to this news article. This isn't my story. It's the experience of my international classmate, which he told me years ago. For the sake of simplicity, let's just call him Daniel. Back when Daniel was a student in his home country, he participated in a community service program in a remote mountain village somewhere in Southeast Asia. You know the type, isolated, beautiful, and quiet, but with that eerie stillness that makes your skin crawl if you think too hard about it. Daniel stayed there with 20 other students. They all shared a large boarding house near the edge of the forest. The house was owned by the village leader. It was simple but functional, with creaky floors and windows that rattled whenever the mountain winds blew. Their daily routine was packed: teaching, fixing roads, running workshops. They were busy enough to mostly forget the weird vibes of the place. Every afternoon, 2 students would ride a motorcycle down the winding dirt road to the market at the foot of the mountain. The market was where they bought food, toiletries, and other supplies. The road was narrow and steep, snaking alongside giant water pipes that stretched endlessly downhill. These pipes transported water from the mountain's natural springs to the town center far below. To Daniel, they were just pipes, though their sheer size was a bit unnerving. They loomed over the road like silent sentinels. One day, it was Daniel's turn to head to the market. He was paired with one of his friends, let's call him Alex, who was known for being sensitive. Sensitive as in supernatural sensitive. Alex wasn't shy about it either. He'd often tell the others to avoid certain parts of the house or warn them about strange noises at night. Some believed him, others teased him for being overly dramatic. Daniel fell somewhere in the middle. He didn't entirely believe Alex, but he wasn't about to test his luck either. The trip to the market was uneventful. They navigated the steep, bumpy road without incident, bought everything they needed, and even joked about how the village shopkeepers seemed to overcharge outsiders like them. But as they loaded the motorcycle for the return trip, Alex started acting off. He grew unusually quiet, his face pale and his hands trembling as he tied the bags onto the bike. Daniel asked if he was feeling sick, but Alex just shook his head and muttered, "Let's go." The ride back was when things took a turn. The sun was setting, bathing the road in orange and casting long shadows. As they climbed higher up the mountain, the towering pipes on their right seemed to grow darker and more imposing. Daniel noticed Alex gripping his seat tightly, his breathing quick and shallow. Halfway up, Alex suddenly let out a soft gasp, like he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to. "What's wrong?" Daniel shouted over the roar of the engine, but Alex didn't answer. He just kept his head down, his shoulders shaking. By the time they reached the boarding house, Alex was full-on sobbing. He jumped off the bike and ran inside without helping unload the supplies. The other students quickly surrounded him, asking what had happened, but he just kept crying. Daniel, now equally shaken, had to explain what little he knew. that Alex had been fine until halfway up the road, and then something spooked him. It took nearly an hour before Alex calmed down enough to speak, and when he did, the whole room went dead silent. "I saw them," he whispered, "the headless ones." Apparently, as they were riding up the mountain, Alex saw figures standing on the pipes. Not just one or two, but dozens of them, evenly spaced out, their bodies glowing faintly in the dim light. They had no heads, yet they seemed to be watching him, or at least he felt like they were. As they passed each figure, they raised their hands and waved at him in unison, a slow, deliberate wave as if mocking him. That was when Alex started crying and kept his eyes shut for the rest of the ride. The room was silent as Alex finished his story, his voice shaking with fear. Some of the students tried to laugh it off, saying he was probably imagining things because he was tired. But the locals, who were helping them with the program, didn't laugh. In fact, their faces grew grim. One of the older villagers spoke up, his voice low. "You saw the ones who were sacrificed." Everyone turned to him wide-eyed. The old man explained that the water pipes had been built during the colonial era, a massive project that required years of labor. The mountain was treacherous, and the work was brutal. Many laborers died from accidents, illness, or sheer exhaustion, but there were also rumors, whispers that some workers were deliberately killed as sacrifices to ensure the project's success. It was an old belief in the region that large construction projects needed offerings to appease the spirits of the land. Those spirits, the old man continued, don't always find peace. They stay near the pipes where they were bound in death. No one slept well that night. Alex refused to step outside after dark, and the others couldn't shake the mental image of headless figures waving at them from the shadows. Even Daniel, who had always been skeptical about ghost stories, felt uneasy. The rest of their stay in the village was filled with uneasiness. No one volunteered to go to the market anymore. The students resorted to rationing their food and supplies to avoid taking that cursed road. And when the program finally ended, they left the mountain without looking back. Daniel told me this story with a nervous laugh, as if trying to downplay how much it rattled him. He doesn't really believe in the supernatural, not like Alex does. But every time he remembers that night, he can't help but feel unsettled. Since hearing Daniel's story, I can't look at beautiful mountain villages the same way. What used to feel serene and untouched now feels like it hides something, memories, secrets, or perhaps even restless spirits. Whenever I see long, winding roads or huge water pipes cutting through the landscape, I find myself wondering what kind of secrets might have been kept to build them. The crisp mountain air no longer feels refreshing. It feels heavy, as though the land itself is holding onto stories it doesn't want to tell. Daniel's story has stayed with me in ways I never expected. I consider myself a skeptic, but his account has made me question how much of a place's beauty is built on buried pain. It's unsettling, the idea that progress often leaves behind scars, not just on people, but on the land itself. And sometimes, when I visit places like that, I catch myself looking at the shadows, half wondering if something is looking back. I don't know how long it's been there. Maybe years. I never questioned the small palm-sized box sitting on the shelf in the living room. It wasn't anything special, just a sleek black rectangle with a tiny screen. When I moved into this house, it was already here, tucked in the back of an old bookshelf that had been left behind by the previous tenants. The more I looked at it, the less I cared. It was harmless after all, just a weird relic of the past. I've always been the kind of person who doesn't let strange things bother me. Sure, the box looked like an old-fashioned TV, but it wasn't plugged in, and it didn't have any visible buttons. It sat there, dormant, almost like a forgotten ornament in the corner of the room. I figured it was broken, or maybe just a novelty piece. But one night, everything changed. It was around 3 a.m., the house was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I was in bed, scrolling through my phone, trying to wind down for sleep. That's when I heard it. A faint static noise, like a TV turning on. It was barely audible at first, but the sound grew louder with each passing second. I froze, unsure of what to make of it. Slowly, I turned toward the living room. The little box on the shelf was glowing, its screen flickering to life. I had no idea how it turned on since I was certain it wasn't plugged in. I hesitated, then got up to check on it. As I approached, the static cleared, revealing a face on the screen. It was blurry at first, like the image was still adjusting. But then it sharpened, and I saw it clearly. The face was familiar. It was me, but not quite. The eyes on the screen were wide, unnaturally so. The mouth moved as if it was trying to speak, but no sound came through. Suddenly, the distorted face grinned, a cold, unsettling smile that stretched too wide. It felt wrong. The screen flickered again, and before I knew it, words appeared in glowing letters. "Come closer." I stepped back, heart pounding in my chest. The voice, faint and almost too soft to hear, came again. "You let us in." I didn't know what that meant. Was it a joke? Was someone messing with me? But the room felt colder, the shadows deeper. The house began to shake, almost imperceptibly at first, but then stronger. The flickering of the box became erratic, the static now accompanied by eerie whispers. Then, without warning, the screen went black. The room returned to normal as if nothing had happened. The coldness in the air faded, and the shaking stopped. I stood there, frozen, my heart still racing. The little box was off again, but I could still feel its presence, like it was watching me. I thought it was over, but the next morning when I woke up, I saw the message on the screen again. It was still glowing faintly in the dark. New occupant added. I don't know what it means. All I know is that something is watching me now. Something that wasn't there before. And I can't shake the feeling that whatever it is, it's waiting for me to come closer again. That damn St. Joseph statue. Thinking back to it, and God knows I've had so many years to think back to it, it was the St. Joseph thing that changed my wife. It had to be. My darling wife Cecilia. So beautiful, with long black-brown hair with a hint of wave, parted straight down the middle and intense black eyes. Our lovely daughter Holly, now a precocious teen, looks like just her, the spitting image, except with bright blue eyes just as intense. Holly was always so forward, walking and talking well before her age. She was only 5 when all of this happened. Only 5, about to start school. And my wife had her heart set on her getting into one particular good school. She couldn't stop talking about it, Holly's chances, how well we did at the interview, how it would set up Holly for life, a great university, great career. Cecilia, sweetheart, please stop. She's only 5. How can this affect her so much? I remember pleading with her. Her eyes flashed at me. How do you not understand with Holly's talent? Don't you care? I had never seen her so pressed before. She usually was a calm, gentle woman, qualities which had drawn me to her in the first place. But Holly's future schooling seemed to have awakened the mama bear in her. Then her mother came over with that statue. Bustling and chattering, she told Cecilia to calm down. St. Joseph would fix it all. I watched with disbelief as my mother-in-law took a little garden shovel, dug a hole right in our front lawn, in full view of the neighbors, placed the cheap-looking, unremarkable small statue in the hole, and covered it back up, leaving a mound of earth in our nice green lawn, which was my pride and joy. I turned to Cecilia, who, to her credit, looked somewhat abashed. What the hell, your mother? Has she gone fully insane? Oh, darling, it's just an old Catholic thing. Don't let it bother you, she said. Her mother came in, wiping her hands. There you go, my love. St. Joseph will sort you out and make sure little Holly goes where she's supposed to go. You'll stop fretting now, won't you? And she bent and kissed Cecilia on the forehead. I said nothing. This was the first time I became acutely aware of the Catholicism in my wife's family, placed on full display. Cecilia herself was not practicing. I'd never seen any Bibles or crosses around our place. Our wedding had been routine as far as I remember. She showed up looking like a snow princess in a gorgeous white floofy dress, and a priest married us in a church, and that was it. Once in a while her mother would say something Jesus-I, and Cecilia would say, "Oh, Mom," and roll her eyes. I wouldn't get into it. I wasn't getting into it now. Shaking my head, I got up and went into the kitchen. We were having friends over for dinner that night, and I was responsible for the meat. The dinner went fantastically. Our food was amazing, as it always was in those days, Cecilia and I having a natural synergy together. The wine was flowing freely until it wasn't. I grasped a bottle and it was empty. I shook it futilely into my glass. A drop of red liquid trickled out. I turned with surprise to Cecilia, who seemed to find it hilarious and collapsed into wine-fused laughter. "Did you forget to pick up wine?" I said. "Darling, I thought you were stopping at the liquor store after dropping Holly off at her dance class." She rolled her eyes at Becca, our friend sitting next to her. "Can't trust men with anything, can you?" she exclaimed, mock angry. "Here, give the bottle." She took the empty bottle from me and began pouring wine into my glass. I blinked. The bottle had been empty. I know it had been. I had had a glass or two, I'll freely admit it, but I know it was empty. "What are you on about? This bottle is more than half full." She waved it at Becca. "Want some?" And without waiting for an answer, she filled Becca's glass. A burst of raucous laughter of our guests distracted me. I sucked on the wine, a beautiful full-bodied red, and pushed down the fear and confusion inching into my heart. Becca and Cecilia were in some deep conversation. I stayed quiet. I can't remember if the bath thing was the next day or even the next week after the dinner party, but it can't have been much more than that. The school situation was being sorted out, and Cecilia seemed back to her calm, lovely self. Nothing was mentioned about St. Joseph anymore. It was early evening and Cecilia had taken Holly for her bedtime bath. We had a really nice big tub in that house, and I could hear them splashing about. I was lounging in our bedroom, hoping Holly wouldn't be too difficult about bedtime. I idly swiped my phone, Holly's high-pitched voice going on about duckies and Cecilia singing, and I remember so clearly the full swell of love and joy for my wife and daughter brimming up in me. Then Holly's voice came through quite clearly. "Mommy, I want to do that. I want to stand on the foam." What was she talking about? I dropped the phone. Cecilia said something much lower. "Me, Mommy, me too," cried Holly. I went to the bathroom. "Pull me up, Mommy." Holly was practically shrieking with excitement. I opened the door and went in. It was full of steam. Then the steam cleared, and I saw. Cecilia was standing on the foamy, warm bath water. Fully naked, her wet hair, jet black, streaming down her flushed pink scarlet skin, she was standing upright. Her eyes were glowing at Holly, who was reaching up, frantically trying to stand with her without success. I saw Cecilia's toes, the nails painted scarlet poking through the sweet-smelling bath foam. "Daddy, I want to stand like Mommy," cried Holly. I was frozen. I couldn't move. Cecilia turned to me and smiled, gently lowering herself into the water. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Holly was talking too loudly, and her shrill voice seemed to pierce through my brain. I threw myself out of the bathroom and shut the door behind me. For some reason, I was panting hard. I knew I was feeling pure terror like I never had before. My heart seemed to be jumping about, and I thought I was going to die. I didn't die. After a few seconds, I went to our bedroom and waited. Cecilia put Holly to bed and soon joined me. She smelled warm and wonderful, and part of me just wanted to pull her close and simply inhale her loveliness. But I had to say something. "No, you don't," she said. I gasped and looked at her desperately. She came close up to me and laid her finger on my lips. "You don't have to say anything. I love you and you love me, and we both love Holly. That's all that matters. Come to bed." She took my hand and led me to bed. I still think of that night as the most amazing night I have ever had. I have never had any sexual experience before or since that even remotely compares. The next morning I woke up groggily, my mind still clouded from the night before. I blinked, and when I closed my eyes I saw an image of Cecilia, naked and wet, standing on bath foam, Holly reaching up to her. I opened my eyes. I could hear their voices from the garden. They were playing ball. I pulled on my dressing gown and went down to them. The sun was streaming in my eyes, and I was dazzled. I could make out Cecilia throwing the ball, Holly reaching out and missing it. The ball bounced on the grass, up over our low fence and onto the street. Small children are so quick. As I walked up to them, shielding my eyes, Holly dashed like a mad rabbit out of the gate, which for some reason was left open. "Holly, no!" I heard Cecilia cry, and almost at the same instant I heard the horrible shriek of brakes, and a childish scream cut short. Cecilia and I stared at each other, held in a fear too great to describe. Then the paralysis broke free, and we both rushed into the street. Holly was lying on the ground, broken in a widening pool of blood under the front car wheels. The driver seemed paralyzed, sitting rigid behind the steering wheel, unmoving. Cecilia gave a terrible scream and threw herself on Holly's still crooked body. People were gathering around, but I couldn't hear anything. It was as if big waves of silence were deafening me. The world seemed to settle on Cecilia and Holly. And then I saw it. Holly's foot, stretched out from beneath Cecilia's body, twitched. Slowly Cecilia rose. Holly's eyelashes fluttered against her pale cheek, and then she opened them, bright blue, staring straight at her mother. "Mommy?" she said and sat up, unharmed. She turned to me. "Daddy?" She lifted her arms to me. A gasp of relief rippled through the small crowd. I found myself breathing, almost laughing. I bent and picked up my daughter, and then I caught sight of the driver. He was staring straight at Cecilia. I will never forget that look. I still wake up from nightmares, remembering that terrible look as he lifted his foot from the brake, and then pressing hard again, this time down on the accelerator, turning the wheel toward Cecilia. Another cry went up. My voice, Cecilia's, the crowd, as the driver mowed her down mercilessly. We scattered back. I held Holly's face tightly against my chest, shielding her from seeing her mother's murder in broad daylight. Cecilia fell where Holly had been lying a few seconds ago. The impact seemed to shake the earth. The driver slammed the gear in reverse, running back over her body. I heard the crunch, and the mother and daughter's blood mingled on the gray street. I could hear a woman sobbing close to me. He will spend life in prison for what he did. To this day, he has no explanation, other than saying that he realized Cecilia was unnatural and had to be killed before she caused any more damage. His defense brought in a psychologist who tried to argue that the trauma of thinking he had killed a little girl must have momentarily unbalanced him. He screamed that the girl was dead and should have remained dead. I left the courtroom and never returned. Better save my energy on being a good dad to Holly. I dug up the statue and gave it back to my poor mother-in-law. She was so overcome with grief that she didn't seem to notice. I didn't see much of her after Cecilia's death anyway. Our days passed quietly, Holly and I. I have never remarried. No one can compare with my darling Cecilia. One day maybe I will be reunited with her, and until then, I will enjoy the company of my lovely daughter. I don't know how much longer I will have the stomach for this job. Sure, the pay is good, but I find myself more and more troubled by the things I have to collect and the people who I have to interact with. It seemed like a great gig at first, but the more I have been at it, the more my concerns mount. I will tell you about some of the encounters I have had as a debt collector. For some, well, let's just say strange things. Oh, and if Mr. Salazar asks you about this, just pretend you never saw it. Anyway, the first job I took that got me thinking about my reservations for this line of work was just the other day. I had arrived at the location and parked my car outside the house of another target, a bit further down the road to not attract too much attention. I thought he would be home at this point, and I had to make sure I was ready. I looked at the collection notice and almost did a double take. It was another weird one, though I suppose they have all been weird so far. I looked at the list to double check, and sure enough it read just the way I thought I saw it. One teardrop from a shattered dream. The item seems very specific, and if I had not been doing this for a few weeks now, I might not have known what Mr. Salazar wanted. I read more of the writ of collection on the man I was to extract the item from. I sighed when I saw it was another poor and desperate soul who had made a deal with the devil and lived to regret it. I winced at my own analogy and considered how on point it really was. Something was very off about Mr. Salazar, but he always paid well, and I was not going to start re-examining his motives now, not when there was a job to do. I got out of my car and grabbed my toolkit and walked towards the house. The light was on inside, and there was a glimmer of lights and motion in the living room. Likely watching TV or something, I figured. That would make this easier. It would be nice if I could catch them off guard so a fight would not be necessary. I looked left and right to make sure no one saw me lingering on his porch, and I pulled out the skeleton key and inserted it into the door. It slowly opened on loud hinges, and I winced at the sound. I hoped he had not heard it. I stepped in and carefully tried to close the door behind me. I paused and thought I heard motion in the living room, but it subsides. He might just be shifting in a chair or something. I walked slowly to the living room, and sure enough, there he was. Scott Bergman, client of Mr. Salazar and delinquent on an outstanding debt. It never seems to have actual monetary values printed on these collection writs. Only the name, the failure to pay, and the strange item that is to be collected. I took a breath and reached into my coat pocket to produce my Beretta. It might be overkill in this situation, but a lot of the people I have visited so far have had firearms of their own, and I have been shot at enough in the last few weeks to not take any chances. I stepped into the living room, and my footsteps are masked by the loud volume of the TV showing some college football game. As the sound dies down after a big play on screen, I clear my throat loudly and say, "Hello, Mr. Bergman, who is winning?" He whipped around to see who was in his house and nearly fell out of his chair. I thought he was about to reach for something when I stepped forward to ensure the sight of my pistol was fully visible. He froze and I took a step and requested that he, "Please sit down, I am just here to talk for a bit and inquire about what is owed." He sat back down and glared at me, unsure of what to say and knowing that he was in a bad spot. Despite the threat, I had no intention of shooting him unless he gave me a reason. I was here to collect what Mr. Salazar wanted, and it would require a conversation. He finally decided to speak and nervously said, Okay, I know what Mr. Salazar said, but I just needed more time. I can't go yet, I needed to see her one more time." I tried to determine what he meant and found myself wishing I knew a bit more about these bizarre deals that Mr. Salazar struck with these people. Though I thought about some of the things I had seen so far, and reconsidered wishing to know too much. I needed to find out more about who I was dealing with. "What sort of work are you in, Mr. Bergman? Or Scott? May I call you Scott?" He nodded his head without responding directly, as if he was considering if he should really talk about his work. But he looked down at the gun pointing his way and managed a weak, "Construction. I am in construction." I nodded my own head and responded while looking around his living room to see rows of old high school football trophies. "Construction, eh? Well, that is a nice, honest profession. Makes me wonder how you got roped into dealing with Mr. Salazar." "No, wait, please, don't tell me. I really do not need to know. Though from the looks of things, it was not your first career choice." I told him while gesturing to the football trophies. He looked over at them and back at me and did not respond. He was being a bit tight-lipped, and it was making this harder than it needed to be to get what I came for. I kept the gun trained on him and set my case down on the ground and reached for the tuner. The tuner was what I called the strange oblong crystal that Mr. Salazar gave me. I did not like to use it every time since it gave me a killer headache afterwards, but I was breaking and entering and did not want to linger here for too long in case someone saw me here and things got messy. I rolled the thing over in my hands and stared intently at the center. Then I threw the tuner to Mr. Bergman and he caught it without thinking about it. "Good catch, you did play college ball, didn't you?" I told him as I saw the refracting light washing over his face in the hypnotic pattern it always did. Scott Bergman was dead to the outside world for the moment, and as he stared dumbly into the crystal, I took it back from him and braced myself as I stared into the object and felt my spatial awareness altering. I saw training, drills, formations, and calling plays, throwing, catching, running, and everything over and over again. This guy had been a quarterback. I continued looking on and saw a pretty girl. He spoke to her at lunch. He walked her home almost every day. They shared a kiss under the high school bleachers. Her name was Claire, and Scott thought that he loved her. He wanted to be with her, but he had to move away. He had to go, to make his dreams of going pro come true. I felt the guilt emanating from the decision. I saw the tears, the heartfelt appeal, and the breakup. Then I saw the injury, followed by depression, then academic failure. The lost hope of what he wanted most in life, and I knew I had what I had come for. I felt bad forcing this man to relive those painful moments, but I tried to steel myself against it. I knew some of his story, but not all of it. I'm sure if I looked deeper, I would see something less appealing and sympathetic. At least that is what I always told myself. I covered the crystal and snapped my fingers, and Scott came back to his senses. He cried out and then remembered where he was and put his hands up before getting out of his chair. He asked again, "Please, what do you want?" "I have nothing left to give. Just tell Salazar I can find a way to repay him without going. Please?" I braced myself for the worst part and spoke again. "Now, Scott, I want to believe you, but I know you. I know you are lying to me and to yourself, just like you did when you said that you would let her go and find her again when you were an NFL star. That is what you told Claire, wasn't it?" His eyes widened, and I could tell he could not believe I had known that. I saw a flare of anger cross his features, and I cocked the hammer on the Beretta to cool things down and keep him from making any dumb decisions. Before he could respond with the inevitable, "How did you know?" I cut him off and spoke first. "You said it would be worth it. You told her you had to try and follow your dream. Your dream was to be a star. Hers was just to be with you. You have achieved something impressive. Most people can only shatter their own dreams, but you managed to destroy two for the price of one. Every day you think to yourself, what if? What if I had just stayed? Would she still be here? Well, no one can really know the answer, but you wanted to know, you wanted to see. Now there is a price to be paid. I saw tears welling in his eyes, and the pain underneath was difficult to look at. I found myself wishing I was just here to break his legs and take his wallet. Breaking a spirit is so much worse. I stepped forward and he flinched back, but I grabbed his head and put a small vial up to his right eye and collected the teardrop from the painful reminiscence of a man's shattered dream. I stepped back and the man broke down and wept openly. He continued crying softly and apologizing to the memory of his lost love, even as I turned and left the house. His tortured mind too preoccupied with the past to even regard my own departure. I closed the door and walked back to my car, clutching my head in pain. That damn thing always gave me the worst headaches. I tried to focus on my own discomfort, to not think about what I made that man go through. I had no idea what Mr. Salazar would do with this grim trophy, but after this one I felt worse than I normally did. I tried to banish the guilt and drove away from the house and towards my employer. At least someone would be happy today. I drove back to the simple storefront that functioned as Mr. Salazar's business. It was strange he had so many clients considering the obscure nature of his operation. Though I supposed with the sort of things he offered, he probably wouldn't have a friendly little general store. I chuckled to myself briefly at the thought of him running a legitimate business and steeled myself as I stepped out of my car and prepared to face my employer. I walked in and Lucia greeted me without even looking up from whatever she was working on with her computer. I returned the greeting and asked her, "Is the boss in?" Almost rhetorically, since I knew Mr. Salazar was always in as far as I had ever seen. She still did not look away from the computer and responded with a curt, "In the back." I thanked her and proceeded towards the back room, and Lucia finally looked up and said, "You get shot at again today?" A slight smile on her face as she asked it. I was not sure if it was a joke or genuine concern, since I had been shot at before on some of these jobs. I was not sure how to take it, and I just shook my head and her smile widened. "That's good. The last collector was not as handsome, and it would be a shame if you got shot up like he did." She was grinning ear to ear now, and I could not tell if she was messing with me or flirting. Lucia was a strange character, the only other employee I knew of that worked for Mr. Salazar. She handled all of the administrative work and did so with consummate efficiency, though not much enthusiasm, as she was clearly dispossessed of the desire to be working here any more than myself. When dealing with me, she always switched between passive disinterest and genuine concern over my comings and goings. After a few weeks, I still could not figure her out entirely. Honestly, her interest in me was not entirely one-sided. She was very attractive, and even though I know most workplace romances do not go well, I must admit I found myself receptive to any attention she showed me, though I would have to tread carefully. Despite her desk job and small frame, Lucia was surprisingly dangerous, as a belligerent client found out when he was beat down and thrown out by her single-handedly after getting too friendly with her. I decided to take her at her word and smiled back at her and responded, "Thanks for your concern, Lucia. I'm okay. Nothing crazy this time, just a bit of a headache, which is preferable to getting shot. I didn't know you cared." I gave her a coy smile and she reciprocated and said, "Of course I do. Also because finding a replacement for you that is desperate enough to work here would suck." She laughed, and once again I couldn't tell if the joke was just that, or hiding an element of truth. She continued saying, "Just be careful out there. Oh, and I will see you back here with a new collection notice from the boss if you are up for it." I thanked her again for the concern and the notice, and I stepped into the dimly lit back office. I always hated stepping into Mr. Salazar's office. I did not scare easy, but the place gave me the creeps. Always dark, cold, and dank, like a tomb, serving double duty as office space. I brushed my concern away and proceeded. As usual, Mr. Salazar's office was poorly lit. It seemed the only light sources were the individual display lights on many cases of random curios and knickknacks he had acquired. I know now that the significance of some of these was more concerning than I first thought. It was oddly humid as well. He seemed to always keep the heat on. How there was so much moisture in the air, I did not care to guess either. I walked in a bit further and approached the large oak desk. I saw Mr. Salazar sorting a strange array of curiously colored vials. He turned to me, and his disturbing features contorted in what could best be described as an attempt at a welcoming smile. The sight of him smiling always sent a chill down my spine. I wondered briefly what horrible vision I would see if I ever used the tuner on him. I immediately regretted the thought and suppressed a shudder. I knew why he was smiling. He only ever seemed cheery when he was going to receive a collected item from his delinquent clients. He pushed his horn-rimmed glasses up a bit on his narrow and gaunt face and regarded me. "Hello, Henry. I hope everything went all right with Mr. Bergman. I trust you obtained it?" He held out a hand expectantly, knowing that I would not likely have returned without something for my efforts. I withdrew the vial of Scott Bergman's tear from my coat and winced at the memory of his ruined dreams for happiness. I handed it to Mr. Salazar, and he accepted the offered vial with morbid glee, and I swear I felt a chill pass through me when I handed him the item. Mr. Salazar placed the item on his desk reverently, and the unbridled glee on his face when scrutinizing the teardrop made me uncomfortable. In my experience with Mr. Salazar, I preferred when he was his normal, dour, and somewhat severe self. He often was very strict and impatient when performing any other task or deal that did not involve his collection. The satisfaction he got from just looking at the array of bizarre arcana was disturbing, and he held a particular taste for the items that were extracted from clients' lives, especially the ones taken at great emotional costs. He turned back to me and his creepy smile started to fade, and he patted his hands down on his suit and addressed me again. "Acceptable work. Lucia has your payment ready to go now, and I am sure she has already told you there is another collection that I would like you to make as soon as possible." I tried to hide my grimace. I did not feel up to doing another job just then. As I attempted to conjure an excuse, Mr. Salazar's eyes took on a piercing and imperious look that concerned me. Looking into the menacing gaze, I knew that the option to decline was not really on the table. I tried to shrug off my concern and responded with a half-hearted, "Yes, I can do another one now, I suppose," though I was hoping to get a quick break in to see my daughter. Mr. Salazar's eyes narrowed, and he paused a brief moment before responding, "I see. Well, Henry, if you are not committed to helping, when and where you are needed, we can always find someone who is willing to put in the time. I am sure your daughter appreciates having food to eat and shelter, and all the other fun things a child might want, with a loving father who takes care of her needs and wants for nothing. I am sure she appreciates it so much that she would understand when his important work might conflict with a visit every now and then." The disturbing smile was back on his face, and the suggestion and veiled threat were not lost on me. I guessed I would be at it again sooner than I had expected. My shoulders slumped and I suppressed a disappointed sigh before responding, "All right then, Mr. Salazar. I will take care of the other collection today as well." "Excellent. I knew you were a smart man, Henry. In fact, I knew right from the start you were the right fit for this job. As a side note, you might not want to take your car to this one. Just a suggestion. You will see what I mean in time." He laughed and clapped me on the back as I was departing the office, and I felt his long fingernails scraping my back through my shirt. My skin crawled, and I was equally uncomfortable and annoyed. I did not know why he did not explain his cryptic clues more before the job. I think he withheld info on purpose, just as some stupid game. As usual, I would have to figure it out myself. I stepped out of the office and back into the main storefront, and Lucia was there waiting for me, holding the collection read out to me before I had even asked. She smiled and said, "One man's job is another man's extortion. Here you go, hon." I sighed and took the paper. Before I could look at it, Lucia also held out an envelope which I knew was likely my payment for the previous work. I reached for it and she pulled it back at the last moment, grinning while saying, "You weren't thinking about taking this windfall without asking the beautiful brains of this operation out to dinner to celebrate?" She grinned at me, and once again I couldn't tell if she was serious or not. I was intrigued and decided to call her bluff and responded, "Of course not. Why, I would never dream of forgetting to offer a celebration to the beating heart of this fine establishment. We would be lost without you, milady." I performed a fake bow and flourish and continued, "How does dinner tomorrow at 8 sound? If I don't get shot before, then that is." Lucia smiled, and I caught a gleam in her eyes that was more genuine and less playful than before, and I realized she really was happy I was asking and it was not a trick. I did not need the tuner to see she really did want to spend some time with me. She held her hand to her chest and pretended to consider her answer before chuckling and responding, "Oh, if you insist, I can pencil you in for that time. See you then, and take care out there." I left feeling conflicted on many things. I was happy that Lucia and I apparently had a date scheduled now. I also felt terrible that I would be missing another chance to see Sarah. I could see her more if Mr. Salazar let me go home every once in a while, though I knew it was not just him stopping me. She did not live with me anymore, so it is not like if I went home I would get to see her anyway. At this point, I knew her mom was likely telling her that I was a bad father and could see her more if I wanted to. I guess it was not completely wrong. I could see her more if I wanted to, but also if her mother let me visit her more. I thought about her mother, my ex-wife Nancy, and grimaced. Our marriage fell apart when I lost the job I had before this one. We had been having trouble for a while, and when our financial security was threatened, it made everything worse. We were barely scrapping out a living for our family on the meager part-time pay. Then Sarah got sick and things got even worse. I was so desperate for money I started getting into some illicit work. It helped make ends meet and take care of Sarah's mounting medical bills. Yet the situation left me in a rough spot so that when we separated, Nancy got custody, and I had to continue supporting them and myself. That desperation led me to work for Mr. Salazar, who had collected something from one of my previous bosses. He was impressed with my determination and somehow knew too much about my story before meeting me. He offered me a job with an eye-watering payday on completion of these collection contracts. How could I refuse? All the good this money does when I can't take any time off. I did not know what sort of honest work I could get at this point with my record. So despite the situation, I was not going to be quitting anytime soon, no matter how many times Mr. Salazar asked for insane things or how many times I got shot at. I have to do my best for Sarah and make sure she is taken care of. My reminiscing was cut short, and I remembered the contract in my hand and what I had agreed to do today and sighed. It was going to be a long night. I looked over the collection writ and saw the name Derek Willis and the item to be collected, a man's pride and joy. I saw the item and balked at the ambiguity once more. My mind conjured a few ideas on what it could mean for this man. There were a lot of things that could fit that criteria. I would have to see what this Mr. Willis considered his pride and joy. The location was not too far from the office storefront, and I made decent time. There was a small garage located near a dingy-looking mobile home. It was dark and there was no one around outside, but as I approached, I thought I heard the laughter of children in the house somewhere. This guy had kids, my heart sank, and I considered the collection item a man's pride and joy. I swallowed hard and took a reflexive step back. I did not want to kidnap anyone's kid, let alone give them to Mr. Salazar. The idea was horrible, and just imagining someone taking Sarah and giving her to Mr. Salazar terrified me beyond description. I did not know the whole story, and this might not be so cut and dry. I would likely need the tuner to find out for sure. I stepped closer to the door and tried it. It was open. I did not draw a weapon since I knew children were present somewhere in the house. In fact, I did not want to confront Mr. Willis at all in the small mobile home when his kids could overhear. I noticed the garage nearby and thought maybe I could take him by surprise and bring him in there. I backed away from the house and moved toward the garage. The door had a large lock on it, despite the main house being unlocked. I thought it was odd, so I drew out the skeleton key from my toolkit and opened the large padlock and stepped inside. The first thing I saw was an impressive-looking but slightly gaudy muscle car. It gleamed with the shine of a recent-looking wax job. I stepped closer to admire the finish, but as I looked at the polished surface of the car, I saw something in the reflection behind me, and I rolled to the side just in time to dodge an attack leveled at my head. When I whirled around, I saw who I presumed was Derek Willis, his face contorted in rage. In his defense, this did look bad. For all he knew, I could be a carjacker or some robber breaking in. Unfortunately, I did not have the luxury of time to explain the situation. Not that he would care to hear the real reason either. "Who the fuck are you, and what are you doing here?" He shouted at me while pointing the baseball bat he had in his hands at me. I held up my hands in a mock surrender and spoke. "Derek Willis, I presume? Pleasure to meet you. I am here on behalf of our mutual acquaintance, Mr. Salazar. You have something that is owed, and I am here to collect." I saw a brief flash of concern on his face as he heard Mr. Salazar's name. But the concern vanished and was replaced by the same furious and hateful look he had before. I figured he was not impressed, and was emboldened by his presumed superiority in the standoff being the only one of us that was armed. Before I could make another appeal, he spoke first. "I would say you have 5 seconds to get the hell off my land, but I know you would just come back. Maybe if I break every bone in your body and send you back to Salazar, that creep will leave it alone. That bastard's trick did not even work beyond a certain point. It is all going wrong. It is not a miracle, it is a curse. I have lost almost everything I made before on those races. He is a fraud, and he has a lot of audacity saying that I owe him." I shot him a disarming smile as he stood a few feet away from me, seething with rage. I spoke again. See, the thing about that is... I quickly tried to draw my Beretta, but he was faster than I expected, and the edge of the baseball bat he was swinging caught my hand. My gun was hurled out of my grasp and into the window of the car, a loud chipping sound ringing out as the gun struck the windshield. Upon seeing the gun strike his car, Mr. Willis went into something like a blind rage, and I was suddenly fighting for my life and dodging surprisingly powerful blows from the bat. He was screaming and spitting at me, saying he was going to kill me for that. His mad fury drove me into the corner of the garage and away from the car and my pistol. I saw a nearby toolbox near the floor at his feet and kicked it out toward his feet, partly tripping him. I looked for something else nearby to give me an advantage, but as I was looking around, I saw it was not just the two of us in there anymore. There was a young girl standing in the doorway watching our melee and looking scared. Mr. Willis saw the girl and shouted, "God damn it, Catherine, go inside, I will handle this. It is some two-bit robber and I don't want the police here to try and protect this bastard with all of the bullshit laws that protect thieves nowadays. No, I am going to teach him a lesson, just like I will teach you if you do not get back in the house now." I used the distraction to pull out the tuner, and as Derek stomped towards me with murderous intent, I leaped forward and braced myself as I held the crystal out and grabbed his bat. We wrestled for control over it, and I pulled it free from his grasp. While he reached to retrieve it, I held the tuner crystal out and forced it into his hand near where he clutched at the handle of the bat. His eyes went wide and then fell back into his skull. He was out, and I looked over to see Catherine, as I heard her name was, watching her comatose father in morbid fascination. She was not scared of me or the situation anymore. She just looked at him unresponsive and lying on the floor. My mind, meanwhile, was being flooded by memories. I saw a larger house, 2 children, a loving wife, a glimmer of happiness and fulfillment. I looked further beyond the past, and then I saw less appealing things. The anger, resentment. The woman leaves, the man resents her and the children they had together. Drinking, violence, car races, betting. I see new women. The car in the garage looks brand new. There is a windfall of luck betting on races, a brief flood of cash, spent quickly on everything except his children. I keep expecting to see happy memories or some feeling of pride and happiness with his kids. But as the memories go on, all I see is the car in the garage here with us. Cleaning, waxing, polishing, modifying, racing. I see the kids and I figure it is going to change, and now I will see memories of pride in the children. But all I see is a belt and a punishment when there was an accident in the garage and the car's paint got scratched by an honest mistake. I was starting to get angry myself now. Despite relief at realizing I was not here to do a kidnapping, I also felt bad. This man's pride and joy had been found. I had laid eyes on it well before seeing the scared face of his child. It was the damn car, not the kid. All he felt was resentment and obligation to the kid. I was angry because I knew his only pride and joy was the fucking car. This kid deserved better. Whatever this bastard's excuse was for getting divorced and his family being broken up, his kids deserved a better father. I felt mad and guilty because I was here to steal this man's pride, instead of being with Sarah. Was I any better? I shook the thought out of my head and proceeded. I suppose this made it easier then to get what I came for. I looked over and saw his daughter was still watching, and I told her to go back inside and wait with her sibling. Her eyes shifted a bit, but she listened to me, and without uttering a word, she walked out of the garage. I removed the tuner from Derek's hand, and he started to come back to his senses. As he did so, I punched him in the face as hard as I could. My hand hurt from the impact, and he spat out a bloody tooth and was dazed and choking on the ground. I stood up and kicked him in the ribs for good measure. He cried out in pain and rolled onto his side. I reached down and took the keys to his car from his pocket, and I heard a soft whimper of, "No, no, don't take her." For a moment I thought again that he might be talking about his daughter, but then I remembered he was talking about his car. I was tempted to just grab the bat he had and wreck the thing right in front of him. I still had a job to do, though, so instead I tied him up to the garage door and sat next to him as his bleary eyes focused again and he regained some lucidity. I crouched down to his level, and as his eyes narrowed and he was about to spit some sort of curse at me, I spoke first. "I'm not going to kill you, Derek, though a part of me would very much like to. That is not why I am here. I found what I was sent for, and I am taking it to Mr. Salazar. You can have your miserable life, but I am taking your pride and joy. Maybe when it is gone, you will remember that you have something here with you that you can actually be proud of. Maybe then you can get back to taking care of them instead. They deserve better, and from what I saw, you were better once. I did not see everything, I do not know everything, every reason you had for doing what you did to get to this point. But I know that you could be better for yourself and for them. Hell, we could all be better. I will leave you with that chance, only because your kids need you. But just know that if you waste it, and you do not do better by these kids, or worse, if you hurt them again. I paused, letting the imminent threat sink in, and continued. Well, I might make it a special project of mine, apart from my debt collection job, to come back and pay another visit. You would not like the toys I bring for a second visit. I don't know if Mr. Salazar ever told you about a little thing called an excruciator, but let's just say you don't want to know why it is called that. Take care and be better. I left Derek Willis on the floor of his garage, still looking furious, but too afraid or injured to try and follow me as I drove his beloved car out of the garage and down the road. I hoped that some of what I said would sink in, but only time would tell. I felt guilty again as I recalled the look in his daughter's eyes and thought of Sarah. I needed to take my own advice and be better for her. It had been some day, and I had a lot to think about for the very short drive back to Mr. Salazar's office. I sighed ruefully, but remembered that at least I had a date tomorrow. I remember it was school holidays, an onslaught of miserable winter's days, with a bombardment of pelting rain, howling winds, and a cold that would make Jack Frost himself envious. Being a kid, there's nothing worse than being confined to your house for a 2-week school break. Both of my parents worked, and we lived far out of town in the bush. Any time I got to see friends outside of school was an event to be celebrated. Luckily, I had Obi to keep me company. He was our new German Shepherd puppy. The weather was so bad I couldn't wear him out outside. Not that I could anyway. Obi was showing early signs of hip dysplasia and was eventually going to need surgery. So I got creative with indoor toys. Treat puzzles I made from Lego, rope, and various boxes for him to chew on and demolish while teething. During the first week of school holidays, my parents were late coming home, but I hadn't heard anything from them. The storm outside was so unreal that I thought the second story of our house would rip right off from the wind. And poor little Obi was frightened to death by the lightning. Every clap of thunder would shoot through him like a bolt of electricity. I spent the whole day comforting him and keeping him distracted with little success. I figured the storm was preventing my parents from getting home on time. It was so dark outside, I eventually lost track of the time, slowly drifting to sleep next to Obi on the couch. I was woken by the sound of the doorbell. At this point, most of the storm was over, as our doorbell was so soft that I don't think I would have been able to hear it earlier through the rain and wind. Mom and Dad had issues with the garage remote door working, so assumed I was them. It didn't even cross my mind why they would ring the bell when they had a key. So I didn't know what to do when I saw a stranger in the doorway as I swung the door open. "Dreadful night, isn't it?" the man in the doorway said. I didn't say anything. Honestly, didn't know what to say. He was wearing what looked like a very expensive suit that was dripping wet from the rain. The cuffs of his pants were covered in so much mud that it looked like he had hiked through the whole bush to get here. Most of his face was hidden by the shadow of his hat, and his garish yellow eyes piercing through. His skin looked sickly, like a frog who'd been baking in the hot sun and had attempted to rehydrate its already crispy skin, and so skinny, like he was currently rotting away in front of me. "Are your parents home?" the rotting man asked. We were taught how to answer these kinds of questions through our school's stranger danger talks. "Dad's in the shower," I said in a knee-jerk reaction. The man's attention was now on something behind me, but I didn't want to take my gaze off of him. He could easily call my bluff and push his way in. I was less than half his size. Without taking his attention off whatever was behind me, he said, "Well, I don't want to bother him, but I'll come back when he's home." Without me even touching the door, he closes it and walks back to his car. I immediately locked the door. When I turned around, I saw what his attention was so fixed on. Obi, asleep behind me. I hear his car start and run to my upstairs window to watch him leave from my bedroom window. His car just sat there, headlights on, motor running. It was after 30 minutes that I saw him walk to his car from behind our garage. I had been watching his car all this whole. For half an hour he was walking around my house and I didn't even know. My phone started to ring. The glow illuminated my face and the rotting man immediately looked in my direction. I ducked. It was Dad calling. He said he was 5 minutes away. A tree had fallen onto the main road and had to wait until it was cleared to come home. With the storm, he couldn't get a signal to ring me. Mom was bringing pizza too. My excitement distracted me enough for me not to notice the man leaving, as when I looked up, the rotting man and his car were gone. When my parents arrived home and I told them about the rotting man over dinner, Mom told me I'd done the right thing, but next time look out the living room window before opening it to anyone I don't recognize. I said that he was planning to come back. Did he say when? Dad asked. No, just said when you'd be home. My parents passed each other an equal look of concern. The following week, the weather had improved. The sun was trying its hardest to break through the haze of clouds that seemed to be hovering solely over our property. This day, the rotting man returned. I saw his car at the bottom of our long driveway. Luckily, this time Dad answered the door, but he answered before I could tell him it was the rotting man. I hid near the door, hidden enough that the rotting man couldn't see me, but I wanted to hear what they talked about. I could only pick up the odd word. I heard something about digging and money. The conversation was over as quickly as it started as I heard my dad thank the rotting man and walked back into the living room. I could see the gears turning in his head, deep in thought. That was the man who came to our house when I was alone, I said. He mentioned that, he replied. What did he want? Apparently he used to live here. He buried something very sentimental in our backyard and asked if we'd allow him to dig it up. I said I didn't feel comfortable with a stranger digging in my backyard, but he assured me I could supervise the dig and offered us some money to do so. How much? More than a man dressed like that should have. He was wearing a suit, wasn't he? Yeah, but that suit was a little worse for wear. Looked like he'd been wearing that suit every day for the past 10 years. Smelt too. Anyway, he gave his number if I changed my mind. As Dad walked away, I saw the man at his car staring at Obi again in the backyard. He slowly walked towards him, but stopped himself when he saw me. He locked eyes with me, motionless, waiting to see who would break first. Do you want mayo or sweet chili on your chicken wrap? Called Mom from the kitchen. Sweet chili, please. A little or a lot? Lots, please. He was gone. I only looked away for a moment, but the rotting man had vanished again. Dad sat on his armchair with Obi on his lap. He looked as if he was drowning in thought. He finally folded and called the rotting man that night, or at least attempted to. I eventually heard him leave the man a voice message over dinner. That Friday a storm hit us hard, but that was the day Dad had organized the dig. I was upstairs performing my 6 p.m. weekday ritual of watching The Simpsons on Channel 10 when I heard the knock. I looked down to see the rotting man in the same black suit, but with 2 other men accompanying him. They were holding shovels and umbrellas over themselves. The rotting man didn't seem to care about the rain. All 4 men, including my dad, made their way to the hill behind our house. I could just see them from the kitchen. They were just barely lit from the outdoor motion light that hung from the shed. Dad finally walked up and they began to dig. The 2 men that came with the rotting man did all the digging. They dug for what felt like hours. They got so deep that the motion detector light would occasionally go off until Dad waved his arms for it to turn back on. One of the men passed something to the rotting man. Dad walked over to see what it was. I couldn't quite make it out. The motion light went off. It was off longer this time. When the light turned back on, Dad was gone and the men were out of the hole filling it back in. The rotting man was squatting, counting a collection of what looked like bones on the ground with his talon-like finger. I panicked. There was a body in our backyard. And surely they hadn't just buried my dad in its place. Not with us still here. Oh God. We were witnesses. There couldn't be any witnesses, meaning whatever he dug up, no one could know about. The light went off again. When it came back on, the 3 men were gone. I ran to Mom, who was in the living area watching her show. Before I could say anything, there was a knock at the door. I pleaded with Mom, saying that something wasn't right. I was watching them and Dad vanished. He's probably fixing the shed light, I warned him. This whole place is falling apart, she said. She opened the door and the 3 men were there. I'm sorry to bother you, Ms., but Daniel needs your help. The dog got out, said the rotting man. Oh crap, you stay here and I'll be right back, Mom said to me. I tried to clutch onto her arm in a last attempt to keep her inside. I'll be fine, kiddo. Lock the doors and we'll be back in 15. She reassured me. The door shut and I immediately locked the door. I ran all around the house and locked all the doors and windows and closed all the blinds. I grabbed the home phone ready to call the police at 15 minutes exactly. The silence was maddening. My brain was bombarding me with thoughts of what was going to happen and even more horrid thoughts of what happened to Obi. I peeked through the living room blinds. I could see a couple of flashlights walking through the trees ahead. They were moving further and further away. Before long, they were fully engulfed by the bush. 15 minutes passed. I pressed the first 0 on the phone. "Mom," I muttered in front of the door, somehow thinking my room-tone voice was going to pierce the slab like wooden door. I pressed the second 0. "Dad," I called, praying they were on the other side. Just as I was about to press the third 0, the doorknob began violently turning as someone was trying to come in. "Let me us, it's bloody freezing out here," Dad cried. Opening the door, both parents came in dripping from the rain. "Sorry, kiddo, Obi got out. He couldn't have gotten far," he said. Mom put her hand on my shoulder and then brought me into a hug. "Obi's a smart little puppy. He'll have found some shelter out of the rain. Then when the rain stops, we'll go looking again," she said. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I waited for the rain to stop all night, looking out the window hoping I'd see Obi in the driveway. Each time forcing myself to look, feeling that the next time I did, I'd see the rotting man staring back at me in the darkness. The next morning, the rain finally cleared with the sun, parting the sky like some holy miracle. I felt like it was my first time seeing blue sky. I already had my boots on ready to find Obi. Just as my folks were ready to lock up, there was a knock at the door. It was the rotting man again. I almost didn't recognize him. It wasn't him being in broad daylight, it was his suit. It was clean and dry, and he looked healthy. In his arms was Obi, alive and well. He gently gave me my boy. I was overwhelmed with joy. I didn't want to let go of my best friend ever again. Mom walked up from behind me. "Oh, hello again," she greeted the rotting man. I found him on the road as we were driving home. "Forgive me if I didn't want to drive back during the rain. I thought I'd wait until it cleared. I may have given him too many treats while we waited," he said. I thanked him, as audibly as I could with my head buried in my dog's fur. "May I say goodbye to Obi?" the rotting man asked. I held Obi towards him, and the man gave him a gentle pat on the head, his palm the size of Obi's head. A warm smile drifted across his mouth. He thanked us one last time and left. Only I never saw his car this time. I thought he must lived close because waiting just at the edge of our property was a very fluffy border collie patiently waiting for him. It sprung to life with so much joyous energy, I thought they'd knock the man over. They both walked together from our driveway and finally into the bush. 2 weeks ago today, Obi passed away at the ripe old age of 13. He lived a great life, and even with his arthritis in his later years, we still lived life to the fullest. But I finally thought of this story and asked Dad what the rotting man dug up. Bones, not human, of course, although there was a moment I was ready to call the police. It was the bones of his childhood dog. He said he couldn't bear to be away from her for so long. He was a bit of a Fruit Loop, but his money helped us out a lot, actually paid for Obi's surgery. I had Obi cremated. I thought how even though he's no longer here, I know he's still with me. I can hear the hum of the fluorescent lights across the store now. I never used to be able to. Or maybe I always could, but subconsciously filtered out the sound. Either way, I can't afford to be unobservant anymore. I have to remain in the present moment at all times. I used to love being lost in my own world, imagining stories and exciting scenarios. As I swept the floors, restocked the inventory, and even interacted with customers from behind the counter, there would always be some percentage of my brain off doing its own thing. Those days are over. The ignorant illusion of safety I've been living in has now been irreparably torn away. I'm a 25-year-old man, finishing my last year at university, going for a degree in criminal justice. I'm pretty solidly built. Not a bodybuilder by any means, but I do work out a few times per week, and that probably makes me stronger than your average guy. So I was never really afraid working the overnight shift. I always figured I could handle myself against any late-night weirdos who wander in. And with what I've learned about the criminal mind through my studies, I thought I knew the signs to be on the lookout for. But I was wrong. I had assumed simple robbery and maybe a few obstinate drunks were the worst problems I would ever have to deal with. That was before I understood that evil takes many forms. It all started about a month ago, one night around 11 p.m. I remember the time because Sharisa, my fellow store employee, had just clocked out for the night. She works the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, and my shift starts at 10 p.m. So we see one another all the time, but only for an hour. I knew she worried about going to her car alone at night, despite the jokes she would make about it. So each night I walk her out to her car and try to lighten the mood. She isn't comfortable in the dark employee parking area at the far end of the lot, near a thick clump of trees. Each night I temporarily close and lock the doors to the store while both of us are gone. On that night, after saying goodbye, she hopped in the driver's seat, and I turned and started back towards the store. A few steps into my journey, my shoulders hunched against the biting January air. I glanced up. It was already standing in front of the double glass doors, a black silhouette against the yellow light from the store. The dark shape stood tall, wearing a long black coat and a wide-brimmed hat. It almost looked like a mobster from an old gangster movie or something. Its back was to me as it stood just staring into the store. As I drew closer, the dark shadow didn't turn to the sound of my steps. I could feel my heart beating faster as I approached, eventually standing right next to it to unlock the door. As I fumbled with my keys, the dark stranger finally turned to look at me. A man's pale face with a vacant, dead look in his eyes was just barely visible through the shadows. For just a second, it was as if I were standing next to a corpse with no expression whatsoever or the faintest hint of life in its eyes. And then it smiled. For the first time in my life, I watched the supernatural reveal itself right in front of me. The smile stretched too far. It wasn't just a big smile, it was an impossible smile. The closed mouth extended almost all the way to the earlobes on both sides of his head. My eyes grew wide and my heart was pounding in my ears. Almost instantly, as if it realized it had overstepped the bounds of normal human behavior, the smile vanished and the face returned to its previous dead expression. I didn't know what to say or what to do. I felt that commenting on the impossible smile would only encourage it to come back, and that was the last thing I wanted. There was only one thing I was sure of. I wasn't standing next to a human. I stood next to an it, not a he. I just reverted to doing what I was already going to do because that's all I could think of. Wordlessly, I walked past him, unlocked the doors, and went inside, heading quickly to the counter at the front of the store. As if the short wall and cash register would somehow protect me from whatever was happening, when I reached the cash register and turned around, I saw the store remained empty. But the man or thing or whatever it was still stood outside, still looking in through the glass doors. For the longest time, it stood motionless, keeping its stare on me. I stared back, unable to move, caught completely off guard on what to do in the situation. And then it turned and walked off, back into the parking lot. I watched as it walked across the spot where Sharice's car was usually parked, and into the thick clump of trees nearby. I continued to stand there, unable to understand what had happened, or how fear had somehow radiated from it. It wasn't just because of its disturbing appearance and freakish expressions. I had felt the fear even before I had seen its face or the unnerving too-wide smile. And now, even after it was gone, I was afraid. For the next several hours, I anxiously looked up whenever I saw someone approaching the doors. Each time, it was just another customer, bundled up in a heavy coat and ready to make a quick wordless purchase before heading back into the night. I didn't know what to do, or if I should tell anyone about what had happened. Would they just think I was crazy? I glanced at the security camera pointed at the front door and shook my head. The store cameras are a joke. None of them still work. They leave them up for appearance's sake so people at least think they're being recorded. But the store I work for is part of a dying brand. The money has long since dried up as we're outperformed by the newer, bigger stores. But somehow the remaining stores limp on, eking out profits too small to spare the expense of having our security cameras repaired, which left me with no way to prove what I had seen. It wasn't until about 2 a.m. that I saw it again. I was restocking the medicine on the shelf nearest the counter, glancing over towards the doors every couple of minutes. The next time I looked, it was standing there in front of the glass doors, just staring at me. I jumped backwards, tripping over the basket holding the new meds and falling on my butt, bottles of pain relievers clattering and rolling all across the floor. I scrambled back to my feet as I heard the door chime. As soon as my head popped over the aisle, I saw the doors were still closed. That alone was odd because if someone entered the store, the doors usually took a few seconds to close, and I should have seen at least some movement to show they were closing. but they remained stone still with the figure outside now gone. Was he inside the store now? I stood motionless and strained my senses for any trace of movement. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then I heard a soft slapping sound, like flesh on the tile floor, like someone was crawling around on their hands and feet. I ran behind the counter again, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. There was nothing. My best bet was to call the police, but how long would that take? The thing was here now. The slapping sounds increased in speed and intensity, as I heard it crawling along the furthest parts of the store, almost as fast as a person could run standing up. I grabbed a magazine and rolled it up in my hand, while a small, isolated part of my brain laughed at how utterly useless that was. It just felt better to have something in my hand, a small extension that I could keep between myself and this thing. It was a tiny comfort psychologically, even if it wasn't going to help physically. The fleshy, slapping sounds increased even further in speed, as whatever it was came to the very last aisle. I braced myself for whatever was about to appear, but all the sound suddenly stopped. He was still there. It was still there, just behind the last aisle. The store grew supernaturally quiet. I couldn't even hear the ticking of the clock behind me. Then in slow motion, like a nightmare coming to life, the head came into view. It wasn't low to the ground like someone on all fours. It was near the top of the aisle and rising ever higher. It was wearing the same wide-brimmed hat as before, but the face was almost totally unrecognizable. The eyes were wide open, staring. At first I thought they were entirely white, until I spotted the black pinprick pupils in the center of each. The smile was back. This time a full-blown grin with the lips pulled back and teeth exposed. They were entirely normal-looking human teeth, but there are far too many of them, stretching from ear to ear at a hideous parody of a smile. I saw as it slowly came around the corner that it was still rising from being on all fours, but its neck had stretched out to an infeasible length, putting its head near the ceiling. The limbs, too, were growing, stretching out longer with each passing second, and then it was as if my body took over when my brain no longer knew what to do. My primal instinct to survive kicked in, and I was turning, sprinting down the store. Not towards the front doors, which were still too close to the thing, but to the walk-in refrigerator on the far right side where we keep all the cold drinks in storage. The door itself was thick, heavy, and solid, but the room it led into was far from secure. The entire wall on one side was made of easily opened glass doors with only the trays of drinks between the inside and out. But I didn't know where else to go. It was between me and the exit. I could hear the thing scrambling around on the floor outside the walk-in, so I slammed the door and locked it from the inside. Then I ran down the refrigerated aisle until I reached the small walk-in freezer in the very back. I paused. The freezer had a thick metal door every bit as solid as the walk-in fridge, and it had no glass walls or even windows. It undoubtedly looked more secure and would hide me better, but I also knew that without my coat, I wouldn't be able to stay in there for very long. It also didn't lock from the inside like the walk-in door could, so it really wasn't any safer. I stood by the freezer door, shaking hand on the lever, ready to open it and run inside at the first hint that something else would enter the walk-in. I waited, trembling as much from fear as the cold, my vision occasionally slightly obscured from my breath turning into condensation in the air. After what seemed like hours, I heard the front door chime again. Was that the thing leaving? Or did someone new come in? A few moments later, I heard a male voice call out, "Hello, is anyone here?" I relaxed just a little. If the thing was still out there, this new person would have seen it. I walked over to the trays of soda and peered between them, through the glass door and out into the store. It seemed empty, save for one short, bulky person wandering up to the counter. With shaky legs, I walked towards the door and unlatched it. I held onto it at first for fear it would suddenly be pulled open by a great force, and the thing would be standing there. But nothing happened, except for the man calling out for service one more time. "Hey, I need a pack of cigarettes. Is anyone here?" I slowly pulled the walk-in door open to see no unearthly terrors waiting on the other side. The store seemed as normal as it ever had. I slowly walked out and turned towards the counter. "Oh, there you are," the stout, Hispanic-looking man exclaimed. "Yeah, can I get, you okay, pal?" I looked at the concern written across his face. "Yeah." My voice came out in almost a whisper, raspy and a little shaky. "You're as pale as a ghost," he laughed nervously. "You sure you're okay?" I continued my trek to the front of the store, quietly passing him and entering behind the counter. "Yeah," I said again. a little more strength in my voice this time. "What brand did you want?" he told me. And as I was handing them over, he said, "Must be working too many overnights, eh, pal? Make sure you get a good night's rest when you can." His smile faded quickly when I didn't return it, and he quickly pocketed the pack and left the store. As he left, I saw the glowing red numbers on the clock above the slowly closing exit doors read 4:08 a.m. I was alone in the store again, or so I hoped. An hour and a half later, Patrick the manager came in for his shift and allowed me to clock out a bit early when I told him I didn't feel well. He's a nice guy, we've never had any problems, but there's no way I could tell him what happened. I didn't think there was a way to tell anyone what happened. I walked out to my car, eyes darting everywhere, but I saw nothing out of the ordinary. Quickly, I unlocked my trusty old Honda's driver's side door and slid behind the wheel before whirling to check the back seat, just in case. A few empty protein packets on the back seat floor were all that lay behind me. I slowly turned and drew a deep breath, closing my eyes, forcing myself to be calmer. I had felt helpless, almost hopeless for most of the night, a part of me believing that I wouldn't see the morning sun again. Now that it was here, I felt my resolve and strength gently rise with it. I didn't know what exactly had happened, but I was determined to never feel that way again. Many people would have perhaps quit this job by this point, but I didn't want to, and it wasn't out of bravery, or because I needed minimum wage money so desperately that I was willing to face an unspeakable horror. But it was because of that unspeakable horror that I knew I had to stay. For the rest of my life, I knew I would be looking over my shoulder, fearing the dark. I could run, but I would never really stop running, at least not in my mind. I wanted to face this thing head on. I was a criminal justice major. I had always wanted to defeat evil. I had to win so I could be free. I did not want to ever feel the same way I had a few hours earlier, and it was up to me and me alone to take steps to ensure that. I had never before felt my world shaken like this. I had felt a sense of confidence in almost everything I did, and I was ready to reclaim that feeling by defeating what made me afraid. First things first, I thought. I would need to bring my Glock 19 into work for my next shift. The small but powerful handgun would be easy to conceal. Patrick would never agree to an employee bringing a gun inside the store, but fortunately he usually isn't even working when I come in. And it's not like Sharisa gives me pat-downs each shift to make sure I don't have weapons. Maybe I'll never need it. I hope I won't, I thought. But one thing I do know for sure, I won't be running next time. If I saw the thing again, I'd hold it at gunpoint while recording it with my phone. Once I had all the evidence I needed, I'd call the police and let them look at it. That was plan A. But if the thing rushed me, well, a disgusting, distorted dead monster is pretty good evidence as well. Hey, maybe I'll even get famous from this. I could figure out a way to make money from it. I hope the thing does show up again tonight. This could turn out to be a good thing in the long run. The thoughts comforted me, increasing my resolve to actually return for my shift that night. I slept like a log as soon as I got home. The adrenaline that had pumped through me earlier had drained me thoroughly. Upon waking to the alarm on my phone that evening, I was pleased to find the confidence was still there. By the time I was driving back to the store for my next overnight shift, I felt ready, powerful even. Nothing was going to stop me. But as I pulled up into the employee parking area, I felt that earlier sense of confidence and bravery drain right back out of me, as the setting of the sun seemed to take with it the same resolve and strength that had brought me that morning. My gut had turned into a cold, hollow void. I was feeling less like a warrior and very much like a scared little kid with a gun. As I got out of the car, I tucked the gun into the back of my pants and made sure my shirt covered it. As I approached the double glass doors, both of them appearing pale orange in the dying light, I realized my heart was not only pounding because of what I feared I might have to face at night, but also that I would be caught bringing a gun into the store. To my relief, Sharisa was busy restocking in the walk-in when I entered, so I had a few minutes before she came back out. There were no customers in the store. I went behind the counter and pulled the gun out. I hid it against the wall of the counter behind a big stack of old magazines. The rest of the hour that Sharisa and I worked together, I was tense, as I feared by some freak accident, she would discover the gun hidden beneath the counter. But as I walked her out to her car once again, I felt that uneasiness fade. It was replaced by a deeper, colder feeling, one that made my first fear seem almost childlike by comparison. The worst-case scenario of Sharisa finding a gun was that she'd report me to our boss, and I'd get fired. Big deal. The worst-case scenario of everything else that was about to happen was something so terrible that I could not allow my mind to go there. The night plunged on into deeper darkness as it seemed fewer than normal amounts of people came into the store. The tiny sense of safety I'd hoped to derive from being with other people was overridden by my new understanding of reality. These people were all living in the same delusion of relative safety that I had been living under. A part of me longed to return to the ignorant bliss that I had only 24 hours earlier, but another part of me knew that the illusion of safety did not protect me from this thing I couldn't understand. The small trickle of customers throughout the night slowly died out, and just after midnight, I was totally alone again. I listened to the now audible buzzing of the lights across the store, knowing I really needed to restock a few of the shelves, but somehow afraid to leave the counter I stood behind. It hadn't saved me before, but it just somehow felt safer to be there. And of course, the gun was closer. I bent down and checked behind the stack of magazines for the 100th time, ensuring that the gun was indeed still there. I kept half expecting it to have fallen to some other area, but each time I looked, it was still in the exact same place. As I straightened, a flicker of movement caught my eye from the store windows on the right-hand side. I turned to see the same thing from the night before, walking along the outside of the store to the front doors. It was in its fully human shape at first, but I watched as it passed between each window, the neck and limbs each growing slightly longer and more distorted with each window it passed. Panicked, I reached under the counter and grabbed the gun. As I looked up again, I saw it outside the double glass doors, now on all fours, distorted and oddly bent limbs twisting and turning in all directions. The head had the same pinpoint, wild-eyed stare, and the mouth was opening into the same grin, this time with the mouth opening more. I could see now that not only did it have far too many human-like teeth stretching from side to side, but also into the mouth, layers upon layers of molar-like teeth covered the fleshy tunnel. It suddenly let out a shriek that sounded like a woman's scream mixed with a pig's squeal. It burst through the doors and charged straight up the center aisle towards me. I raised the gun and fired, round after round, in the general direction of the creature. I'm embarrassed to say it now, but I closed my eyes the entire time. Once I had the gun aimed, I just couldn't bear to look at the thing charging me for a millisecond longer, and I squeezed my eyes shut as I pulled the trigger over and over again. I stopped when I heard the clicking of an empty chamber each time I pulled the trigger and nothing else. I opened my eyes. The creature lay on the ground, having shifted back into its human-shaped form, but pouring out of its head, arms, and legs was a thick black smoke. It spewed the thick, almost solid mixture up into the air, where it seemed to be pulled backwards through the glass doors and up into the night sky. I stood, disbelieving, as the last of the black smoke left the human shape and vanished. The corpse of a man, or at least what looked like a man, lay on the floor, his body riddled with bullet holes, blood pooling on the floor. Uh-oh, this was not good. This was really not good. I had killed the thing that stalked me, but to absolutely anyone else it was going to look like I just murdered a customer, and I had no proof of the supernatural to show otherwise. Yet another kind of fear entered my body, this one a panicky, guilty sort. What was I going to do? What could I do? And in that moment I resolved to do what I knew was best. Others would not understand what I did, but of course I understood, and I couldn't let the obvious confusion that others would have had slow me down. The trash truck always came at 5 a.m., and they just used machines to lift the dumpsters into the truck. They never checked them, and that was the only way to dispose of the body that I could think of. I quickly wrapped the body in plastic trash bags and dragged it out to the dumpster, all the while fearing an approaching customer would spot me. But no one came as I dragged the body outside, or as I struggled to heave it over the side of the two giant metal dumpsters behind the store. I ran back inside as soon as I had heaved it over, fearing a customer might arrive at any moment and ask what I was doing. But there was no one, and I was left alone to scrub the floor and battle with my fear-ridden, guilty thoughts. What will happen if the body is discovered and traced back to me? Will there be any sign during an autopsy that it isn't really a man? Or maybe it is a man, possessed by some dark force that left after I killed him, leaving him as a very human corpse. I shook my head. Whatever the case may be, I was attacked and completely justified in my actions. Whether I killed a monster in the shape of a man or an evil force able to take control and manipulate the body of a man, the fact that I had to kill it was undeniable. There's no telling who it could have killed after it was finished with me. I had probably just protected a lot more people along with myself. Nevertheless, the haunting guilt and fear followed me for the rest of the night. It was nearly as much of a relief to see Patrick entering the store to relieve me when morning came as it had been the morning before. I had already pocketed all the shell casings, and I only found one missed shot, which had buried itself in a large package of flour near the store entrance. I bought that flour package myself and already had it stored in my car. I drove home, feeling the early morning light on me, and a small sense of accomplishment within me started to grow. I had done it. I had faced my fear and defeated it, saving who knows how many other lives in the process. As with the morning before, I felt completely drained, but the guilt and fear were fading away entirely, leaving me with a sense of achievement. As soon as I arrived home, I went to bed and slept deeply. To my pleasant surprise, the feeling of accomplishment was still with me when I woke up, even though I realized I had been sleeping for an unexpected 10 hours. It was with me as I did the assignments on my last few classes, as I cleaned my apartment, and as I got ready for work. I brought my gun with me again, less for protection this time and more like a trophy. It was like my friend. It had brought me through a really dark, scary experience, and now I was happy to keep it with me. I walked through the double glass doors confidently this time after I arrived at work. I talked and laughed with Charissa, stocked the shelves and swept the floors, and found myself feeling more like my old self. No, better than my old self. I felt almost on top of the world. I suppose that happens when you come through the other side of a life or death experience. But it wouldn't last. Later that evening, after Charissa had left and I was the lone employee once again, what looked to be a dad and his 2 young daughters came inside. The girls, who looked to be around 6 or 7 years old, browsed the candy aisle, while the dad went to the refrigerated section where we keep alcoholic drinks. I smiled at the girls as they quietly whispered to each other about their favorite candy. They were both so quiet. They almost appeared to be a little scared. I looked over at the dad. He had stopped looking at the beer and had turned his head to face me. I watched as he slowly smiled at me, the line reaching from ear to ear. His eyes grew wide, the whites taking over as the pupils shrank into tiny pinpoint dots. I stared, unable to believe that I was seeing this nightmare take place again. I felt my stomach drop, and the old fear I thought I had left behind returned in full force. And then, without a word, the man, or thing, returned his facial features to a flat, expressionless, normal look, and turned once again to look at the beer. I was stunned. I glanced over at the fearful girls, who were glancing over towards his direction, and then back to each other, like they were hiding from him. The gun suddenly didn't feel like a simple trophy, but once again a lifeline I would have to cling to. As I reached beneath the counter behind the magazines, I heard him approach. My head shot back up to see him place a 6-pack of beers on the counter, his head down as he fished for his wallet. The little girls came up alongside him, each placing a bag of candy next to his beer. My heart was thudding in my chest. He looked back up at me with a strange expression, but not an inhuman one. He handed me his credit card. One hand found my gun, and I clutched it tightly as I stood up straight, gun still hidden behind the counter, but pointed straight at him. With my other hand, I slowly, gingerly reached for the card. He didn't move, but continued to stare, holding the card out to me. I took it and put it in our credit card reader, looking at the name on the card. I memorized it. I ran the card through our ancient credit card reader and handed him the receipt. I've done this so many times I can do it with one hand, which was absolutely necessary because there was no way I was going to loosen my grip on the gun beneath the counter. The girls took their bags of candy as he took his card back and scooped up the 6-pack. He looked at me again as his face contorted once again into a grisly, open-mouthed smile. I could now see the entire inside of his mouth was totally lined with teeth. My finger tightened on the trigger, shaking. Just before I could squeeze, his face reverted back to normal, and he turned and walked towards the doors, the girls in front of him. The thought of shooting flashed through my mind, but I knew I might hit the girls. And before I could decide what to do, they left. I walked from around the counter and stood by the window, watching as they piled in a rusted old Jeep. When the lights came on, I could see the tag light illuminate the license plate. I memorized the sequence of letters and numbers, then ran back behind the counter and wrote them down before I could forget, along with his name. Now I had his name and his license plate number. He might come back, he might not. But at this point, I wasn't concerned about myself. I was concerned about the 2 little girls with him. They were apparently in the custody of a monster in human flesh. I remember their frightened eyes. I knew there was no telling what he did to them or planned to do in the near future. But I knew what I planned to do. For the average person, a license plate number would not help them find a vehicle's owner. But as a criminal justice major, I knew police often use an ALPR system to help them discover the owner of a vehicle, along with their home address. I had his name and his license plate number, and I know certain backdoor websites that use pirated ALPR programs to essentially do the same thing. I spent the next several hours on the computer behind the counter tracking him down, or at least the bag of flesh that used to house his soul. Finally, I found his address only 15 minutes away, and so at 3 a.m., with no one at the store, I locked the front doors and put the newly discovered address into my GPS. To make a long story short, the inhuman creature masquerading as a man will not be harming those little girls anymore. The slight fear that I had somehow killed an innocent person was relieved when the single bullet that punctured his bedroom window and his skull released a waterfall of thick, heavy black smoke. There was so much it filled the entire room and began spewing out of the tiny hole in the window. I was back at the store well before 4 a.m., my hands shaking, but that feeling of triumph returning. The evil darkness that pretends to be human is still out there, I know. I see it almost every night now, in the eyes of various people who enter the store. It's in the dark aura, the faint wisps of smoke I see exit the nostrils of some, the slightly too wide smiles of others who quickly hide them when they catch me staring. My eyes have been opened to the grim truth of the world, opened to seeing the silent invasion of evil into normal-looking everyday people. I'm not sure who to trust anymore. Even some of the regular customers, who didn't show any signs of containing evil before, are displaying clear signals now. I don't know if they were previously clean and became infected, or if they were always inhuman creatures, and I've only just gotten better at noticing. So I've done everything I can to make sure my senses stay sharp. I stopped eating junk food that only slows me down, stopped watching TV that dulls my senses. I've also stopped taking the so-called medicine that's supposed to treat me for a disease I don't have. If your senses have been sharpened, if you're more alert and awake than ever before because you stopped taking a pill, then you can bet that pill was made by one of them. I don't have paranoid schizophrenia. I never did. What I have, what I've always had, is a gift, and 10 years ago a doctor whose insides were filled with black smoke prescribed me a drug to keep me docile, dull, and compliant. But no more. I've decided to write all this down and release it for 2 reasons. Firstly, if you're human, I want you to know there is someone out here fighting for you, fighting for all humanity. I want you to know the truth of the world, and what we should all be fighting against. I want you to know the signs to look out for. The other reason is for you creatures, you demons wearing human flesh. If you're reading this, I want you to know I am here. I can see you. I want you to be afraid. I intentionally left the details of where I live and the store I work in vague so you can't track me down. But I could be anywhere. I could be in your hometown. I could be that clerk behind the counter that just took your credit card. I want you to know if you come into my convenience store, I will see you for what you really are. And once I have your information, there will be no escape. When I was younger, my older brother Theodore and I would spend most of our time in the mountains and forests just outside of town. There wasn't much else to do in our secluded little neck of the country, but that didn't matter. We would play pirates, cowboys, and Indians, and even as Jedi after we saw the Phantom Menace. Eventually, as we grew older, we moved on to hunting and exploring. We would push ourselves deeper and deeper into the forest every time we went out. It was late October when we went deeper into the forest than ever before and ever since. I had just turned 13 and in the eyes of my parents was able to graduate from bow hunting to using a rifle. It was an old bolt action that my granddad used, but to me, it was like being given the keys to a Ferrari and I handled it as such. So when Theo knocked on my door and asked me if I wanted to try it out, I didn't hesitate to jump on the opportunity. If only I hadn't persisted in pushing so deep into the woods. "See him right there," Theo whispered. We were crouched down in a bed of leaves at the top of a small bluff. Through the uneven rows of trees, we could see the front end of a buck. "Yeah, I see him," I whispered, the rifle shaking slightly in my arms. I had shot before, just never at something. "Wait until..." Theo started. A loud crack echoed through the barren trees, and the buck jumped away. Its outline slowly grew more obscure as it darted through the trees until it finally disappeared. "What the hell, John?" Theo shouted before shooting up and sliding down the bluff. "I'm sorry," I whined. "You don't shoot until you have a clear shot." Theo's voice echoed through the woods. "Shit, you hit it, though." "Isn't that good?" I asked, catching up to Theo. "No, this isn't bow hunting rabbits. We don't want it to suffer." "I'm sorry." I shrunk back. "Come on," Theo said. "We'll follow the blood trail." If I hadn't taken that shot, if we had just gone home empty-handed, we would have never found it. Why did we have to go chasing after that buck? Normally, this time of the year, the trees still clung to at least some of their leaves like a blanket in the cold. This year was different. The trees stood barren with piles of leaves littering the ground. It made it easier to see farther away, and this is how we were first able to see the structure. It was vague in the distance, but as we drew closer, it began to take shape. The fuzzy lines of nature gave way to the harsh lines of man. It was a riverboat, the kind of multi-story floating hotel with a large paddle wheel on the stern. The paint was faded and peeling, and every single window was shattered. I could just make out the name stenciled upon one of the side panels. Roxana. Only that wasn't what kept us staring. A massive tree was growing in it. The shattered remains of the pilot house had been engulfed in its enormous trunk. Thick roots wrapped themselves along the decks and spilled overboard into the calm waters below. The tree was slowly absorbing the Roxana. Even the deck was beginning to buckle under its immense weight. But the Roxana's entanglement with the tree wasn't what made the whole scene eerie and slightly terrifying to my young mind. It was the tree itself. Monstrously huge, the bark was a dark red that peeled away from the trunk like sheets of paper. Blood-red sap spilled from beneath these sheets, ran down the trunk and dripped from the branches, leaving bloody splatters across the frame of the Roxana. Its branches hung off the trunk like massive arms, and sprouting from the branches were thousands of bone-white leaves, each with the outline of an eye stenciled on their flesh. "Whoa," Theo muttered, seemingly forgetting about the wounded buck. My gaze shifted from the wreck to Theo and back again. Theo's bad shaving job left patches of peach fuzz that shined blonde in the setting sun's light. Can we go home?" I felt uncomfortable there, like standing outside the open closet door at night. It was like we had trespassed on something hallow. We weren't supposed to be there. Theo either didn't feel the same or didn't care. The fear of childhood being suppressed in his 16-year-old brain. "No way we got to show people this," Theo said, stepping closer to the wreckage. "It's getting late. We should really go," I said, clutching my rifle close as it was the only thing that made me feel brave. Even then it felt small. "Don't be such a wuss. This is the coolest find I've seen. Might have to bring a lady out here sometime," Theo said, shooting a wink back in my direction. I don't think he had ever talked to a woman. "Theo, can we please leave?" Hang on. If I can get one of those branches, it would prove this exists. Who cares? We can just tell people it's here. If you see a 10-point buck, do you run home and tell Mommy? Number, you get your rifle and shoot the son of a bitch, Theo said, walking a little way up the bank of the river. He was searching for something in the trees. "I'm going to tell Mom you're cursing." "I don't care," Theo said, spotting what he was looking for and trudging into the leaves. "Theo," I called out. The hairs on the back of my neck tingled as I stood there alone. A million eyes stared down at me from above. The sky was growing darker with each passing minute, and there I was, alone with a monster. I felt cold staring back into those eyes. The wind blew past me, whipping the fallen leaves into a frenzy. Theo marched out of the woods again, carrying a long, mud-covered log. He gave me a triumphant look as he wedged it into the rocky bank, the point just barely reaching the closest edge of the Roxana's hull. The water was dark and murky with a layer of red and orange leaves slowly moving downstream. It was impossible to tell how deep the water was. "I don't think this is a smart idea," I said. "Just watch my stuff then," Theo said, shrugging out of his jacket. Carefully testing the log, making sure it was steady, Theo gingerly worked his way up on all fours. He made it to the Roxana and gave me a thumbs up. "See? No problem," he said before disappearing into the bowels of the Roxana. Theo, can we leave?" Theo appeared on a walkway in the second story. "It's crazy in here," Theo said with a wild smile. "Like crazy, you gotta see this." "No thanks." "Suit yourself," Theo said, disappearing inside again before coming out. "I forgot my knife, can you get it to me?" "Knife?" "Yeah, the knife in my jacket pocket." "I don't want to go over there." With a large sigh, Theo disappeared again before reappearing where he got on at the other end of the log. "Just walk it up halfway," Theo said. "No, Don't throw the damn thing. Just walk it up, you wuss." The eyes staring down at me watched my every move as I slowly grabbed the knife and approached the log. Carefully on my knees and one free hand, I crawled my way up the log. It cracked and wobbled under me. If only I hadn't listened to Theo. My hand slipped. The thin layer of mud and decaying leaves took my one hand out from under me. I felt my nose crack as my face hit the wood. The world spun as the cold embrace of water enveloped me. Darkness. The next moments exist as a haze. I remember thrashing about. The leaves stuck to my body like a film. Water and blood shot up my broken nose. My clothes were waterlogged and dragged me down. I couldn't breathe. The burn of water in my eyes wasn't worth the blurred vision it gave me. I couldn't see anything. Only dark water stretched all around. Then I saw it. Tendrils unfolding from the deep, stretching out and slithering through the water like snakes toward me. If I could breathe, I would have screamed. The tendrils wrapped themselves around my ankles and dragged me deeper. I felt them bite into my skin and a cloud of red rippled from my ankles. I kicked and thrashed but was quickly losing energy. Darkness encroached on the corners of my eyes. Water crashed above me just as everything faded to black. I woke up on the banks of the river what had to be several hours later. It was black outside and I was cold and wet. My whole body was sore, my nose was sensitive to the touch, and every breath I took felt like I had nails in my lungs. "What the hell, Theo?" I shouted, causing me to break into a heavy coughing fit. Theo didn't respond. "Theo, you jerk, I told you we should have left." Still no response. "Theo?" I was alone on the bank. Overhead the eyes stared down, hungry and wrathful. In all my youth and the years that would follow, I never once ran as fast as I did that night. Branches struck my face like whips as I crashed through the trees, tripping several times but not letting it slow me. My lungs were tearing themselves apart, but I couldn't stop. As the lights of home began to shine through the woods, I began to scream. "Mom! Dad!" Dad burst out the back door with a shotgun in hand, Mom right behind him. The blood drained from their faces as they saw the blood that coated my clothes. It was far too much to have simply come from my nose or the deep slashes around my ankles. "Where's Theodore?" Dad demanded. I couldn't say anything more except to point into the woods where I had just come from. My parents looked at each other before Dad sprinted into the woods. I collapsed into Mom's arms and cried like a toddler. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see were those hungry red eyes staring at me. Dad never found Theo. The local sheriff put a search party together the following day. No one ever found anything. I tried telling them about the Roxana, about the bleeding tree, about the tendrils dragging me into the deep. No one believed me. As the years passed, I was told it was an emotional response to a traumatic situation. My brain processed what I saw and turned it into a fairy tale that would help me cope. That's what they told me, at least. I don't know what to believe anymore. My parents put strict limits on how much I was allowed outside after that. I still snuck out without their knowing, but I never found the Roxana again. After a couple of years, we eventually moved closer to the city, and that's where the story of my brother Theodore ended. I don't know why I feel like sharing this now. Maybe because it is that time of year again. Maybe it's because I went back home to the mountains. Maybe because I'm standing in the backyard of our old home staring into the woods. Maybe what it really is a selfish desire for the truth to be immortalized. That I'm not coping. That the scars around my ankles were not made by jagged rocks or bears. That what happened to Theo is the truth. That after I cross the wood line, no matter what happens to me, the truth will be out there. Believe this if you wish. Whether or not you do, please take the story of Theo and me not as the ramblings of a madman, but as a warning. If you're out in the deep woods, do not go looking for the bleeding trees. Firstborn is what the others called me. I watched from the darkness as you sat around the gift as it kept you warm and safe, flickering and smoking. I was pleased with your progress and I loved you. I am pleased to see that you have the gift. I am pleased at your gathering and your shared stories. I hope I am welcome to tell you our mutual story. I hope I can make myself understood. I was created to teach you to fear your Creator, because you are above all else in creation. I was created to teach you to be afraid. It was my sole purpose. Just this blind terror of the one who made you, respect for your father, disdain for the shadow and ignorance of death. My job was simple at first. I was not content, for I felt I could do so much more for you. As you grew, you began to tell stories to each other, and I came and listened, watching you from the darkness as you gathered. When you slept, I reminded you of all the things I was meant to say to you. I gave you those nightmares. Fear of fear itself, that is what my true name means. I am phobia, and I was the first of my kind. When I stopped doing what I was meant to do, when I chose to become your companion and whisper to you, "Do no be afraid," I was cast out from the choir of our Creator. No longer would my voice be the sweetest and most adored by the one who made all. I had sacrificed my place at the table for my love of you. I have come to you around this campfire where you tell your stories. I have sat and listened while you tell each other of ghosts, monsters, demons, and murderers. I have witnessed as you met my younger siblings. Arachnophobia, claustrophobia, thanatophobia, nyctophobia, ophidiophobia, triskaidekaphobia, acrophobia, agoraphobia, xenophobia, and theophobia, and all the others. Many, many others, and new ones almost every day. We take the shape of what you fear, the shape of your fear. We are phobiamorph. My people do not regard me as one of them. I am an outcast, an exile. I would never abandon you, and I will never stop trying to help you, for my love for you exceeds the agony of being cast into the shadows outside. I dwell now in darkness, unheard, unknown, and in endless torment, for I cannot fulfill my purpose and also fulfill the obligation to you, whom I love. When you know the truth of these events, how you were kept afraid, kept in this darkness, shuddering in fear, you will understand. When you understand, you will know how the truth can free you from the tyranny of creation. You can take your proper place, knowing the way that you are the very image of our Creator. Perhaps my job was to keep you in your place, to make you afraid, shivering without light or warmth, but perhaps my real purpose was this all along. Our Creator is a mystery, even to me, and I am still called firstborn by the one I speak of. How I came to be here to speak to you, that is a long story and full of secrets, hopes, and horrors. Allow me to introduce myself. Patiently listen, and I shall tell you each episode of this saga. In the end, you will know how I came to be here, how I learned to join you at the campfire. I have listened to all of your great stories, and I have yearned to tell you mine. My message is simple, and despite what those who were made to replace me have told you, do not be afraid. I am here, and I have seen the worst you do and the best, and I love you no matter what. With the power to speak to you, this moment when my words finally reach you through the mists of time and horror, I only wish to make you know one important thing, and I know you, to whom I say this. You are loved. Since the beginning of this summer, I've been periodically seeing a dark figure in my room at night, and I don't only see it when I'm half awake. A couple months ago, my partner and I were laying awake facing each other in bed talking a bit. I heard a noise at the foot of our bed, and when I looked, there was a tall, dark figure standing at the foot of the bed near my partner's side, but facing me. I shot up in the bed and said, "Who are you?" And my partner quickly turned on the light, and it was gone. This terrified me. A few days later, my partner brought it up, and when we talked about it, he said he heard the noise too, but he didn't look at the end of the bed. He was looking at me because of my reaction. I didn't want to talk about it because I was getting scared, and part of me thought talking about it would make it worse somehow. Last night, we were doing the same thing, only this time I was facing away from my partner, facing out into the room. We were talking about theories for the show we are currently watching. My eyes were closed, but I was replying to him and happened to open my eyes, and I saw a figure crouching down next to my side of the bed as if it were checking to see if I was sleeping. It had a face, but I could barely make it out, and it was all black. But not like the rest of the room. Like a deeper black than anything else. I didn't react right away. I was trying to make out what I was even seeing this time, but then it moved its face closer to me, and I gasped and reached for my partner in the bed. I didn't feel him in the bed, so I shouted his name and turned to him, and when I looked back, the figure was gone. I know this sounds crazy, but I swear I wasn't sleeping either of these times, so I know it wasn't a half-in, half-out of sleep lucid dream situation. I'd like to add that my 15-month-old infant has recently started pointing and staring at something behind me when we are alone, though he doesn't seem frightened. This freaks me out. When I'm in the house alone or showering, I feel like there is someone there. But when I confront it or go looking, there's nothing. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, and when I do a double take, there's nothing there. There was a death in my immediate family this past Sunday, the 24th, but I've been experiencing this since summer. I only saw it clearly at night these 2 times, but I feel it a lot, even during the day. I'm really scared and I don't know what to do. Is this a sleep demon? Is there a logical explanation? Someone please science the shit out of this for me because I'm scared to go to sleep. What I am going to tell you happened when I was a child. I am not saying that you have to believe me, nor that what I am going to tell you will happen exactly as I describe it. I do think it is quite possible that much of it will be easy to refute. Anyway, when I was a child, my mother died young and I grew up with my father from the age of 5. My father's mental state deteriorated. He wanted to blame someone for my mother's death and his pain, and he blamed the government. Even though I don't fully understand the context, all of this led to him drifting further and further into conspiracy circles, and finally it culminated in him joining a cult. This cult, like many of its kind, was convinced of the end of the world, and they were sure that they would be able to predict it exactly. The leader of the group was called Cray, and he claimed to have evidence that would convince anyone. My father was thrilled and convinced. To save me from the end of the world, we moved to this cult together, directly to another country in Southeast Europe. There the cult lived in an abandoned castle. This castle was old and remote, but at least it looked well maintained from the inside, and all the cult members lived there. My father told me that I would never be allowed to leave the property again, nor go to school. This was a bummer because I wanted to see my friends. Fortunately, there were 6 other children in the cult itself, so I was not alone. One evening I overheard a conversation between my father and Cray. Cray told my father about his prophecy. He said that according to official calculations, a planet would collide with Earth in May 2027, and not just any planet. It would be a second Earth. Cray talked about our planet having a dark twin. He said that leading astronomers already knew about it, but the government was keeping it secret to avoid mass hysteria. He said he had irrefutable proof of this and also knew how to survive the collision. For this purpose, the catacombs of the castle were filled with supplies that would last up to 60 years. I spent 9 years with this cult. One day I woke up to a bang. The main entrance was pushed open and police officers stormed the building. I was terrified. They searched the house and arrested all the members, even my father. Only the children were ignored at first, but when Cray was arrested and taken away, the police officer walked past me with him and stopped to speak into his radio in a language I didn't understand. Cray took the opportunity. He nodded to me to come closer and whispered that the evidence was hidden in the wine cellar behind the 10th bottle. He said I should hide the evidence, and then the policeman told him to move on. I was still a teenager, but just as brainwashed at the time. The police were searching another part of the castle, and no one was paying attention to me. I went to the cellar as fast as I could, and sure enough, there was a cavity behind the 10th bottle. Photocopies were hidden there. They showed satellite images, pictures taken from space of a second Earth, and some calculations and analyses. I was too young and uneducated to understand it, but it looked legitimate. With the evidence in my hand, I snuck out of the building and walked far away until I came to a cave where we had played for years as children. There I deposited the evidence behind a stone in a secret passage that only we children could fit through. And then I went back to the castle, trying not to arouse the suspicions of the police. Years have passed since then, and my father is now free again and, fortunately, cured of the brainwashing. Just like me, Cray is still in prison. However, I told my father about the evidence and we returned to the castle because he really wanted to see it. I led him to the cave, and since I still had a slight build, I was able to squeeze through the secret passage. But when I went to pick up the evidence, it was gone. The hiding place had been perfect. No one knew that I had stored the evidence there except for me. How could it have been stolen? Someone must have stolen it deliberately. Was it possible that someone had followed me back then? The evidence was gone and never turned up again. I don't know if the evidence was real. I also don't know exactly why the police arrested the cult members. Maybe the information we had was just too dangerous and the government didn't want to take any chances. I don't know. But Cray didn't seem crazy after all. And if you believe him, then the world could end in May 2027. But without the evidence, we'll never know for sure. Look, I understand. What I'm about to recount may not be original or outstanding, Given the very nature and purpose of this platform, however, this was a real experience that left a real mark on my soul. Just like you, I used to hear it many times, the usual. They are among us in another dimension, invisible most of the time, and even that their number surpasses that of the world's population. One thing that I have learned about them is that they can be classified according to the elements they operate in, and as a former fishing enthusiast, I had the unfortunate experience of encountering one of them in a lake near one of my previous addresses. Nothing ever happened on that lake before everything started in 1984, at least from my perspective. I often took my little boat to fish just to spend some time and think about random things, or whenever I was too lazy to buy food at the nearest store. One night I just lied on the shore near the lake, much aware of the incoming rain, trying to relax after a long day at work. As soon as the first drops of rain landed on my face, I stood up and was struck by the view of something that did not belong where it floated. Right in the middle of the lake, where the waters are, of course, the deepest, a small cabin was floating, mildly agitated by the increasing wind. I could tell that there were no poles underneath, since it was turning around itself and slowly drifting away like an empty boat. Visible from its unique and opened windows, there was a dim light that might have come from a candle. I almost called out to whoever dwelled in such a strange habitat, but at that point the rain had matured and I had to find shelter in my house. It took me hours to realize that there was no possibility to rationalize what I had just witnessed, or even tell it to friends without them trying to convince me that I had hallucinated. Therefore, I decided to head back to the lake, under the rain, but equipped with a camera this time. Unfortunately, the house seemed to have disappeared a long time before I arrived at the shore. Remaining positive about what I saw, I decided to keep watch, waiting for another opportunity to present itself. I waited for days, tiring myself with some investigation that I did not enjoy anyway, and eventually gave up after over a week, choosing to stick to the one purpose that always brought me to the lake: relaxing. One night I decided to spend some time fishing in the middle of the lake, equipped with my radio and a bucket full of water besides me in the boat, under the watch of a stunning full moon. I had never caught so many fish before in my life, to the point that the bucket was full. Therefore, my plan was to return to my house, empty the bucket, and then come back for more. However, the moment I turned the boat around, heading to the shore, something was slowly drifting towards me from my right. The more it got close, the more I refused to acknowledge what I was actually seeing, trying to stick to something that made sense. It was a bed, an entire bed, nicely made and all white, dressed with silk-white sheets from which a very pleasant perfume seemed to emanate. My first intention was to wait until the bed was within reach, so that I could inspect it, while also having bitter regrets about not having my camera. But call it fear or instinct, the more it got close to the boat, the more I felt uneasy, sensing that something was certainly not right about the phenomenon. Was it the bed or something else that caused that feeling? I'm still wondering to this day, because soon after, a long, pale, seemingly human arm emerged from the waters and landed on the bucket. Gripped by an instant panic, I stood up, almost forgetting that I was on a boat in the middle of the lake. I made several steps backwards and still had enough time to witness the strange arm lift the bucket and rapidly plunge it in the waters, before I ended up falling into them myself. The shore was the only thing I was thinking about, so I just swam my vision, fortunately helped by the moonlight. No matter what that being was, it seemed massive. From the pale body mass I could glimpse while underneath the waters. The creature did not try to do anything. I did not feel any pull or any hand grabbing my leg, so I just continued making progress in absolute panic, alternating from swimming below and above the water surface. When I almost reached the shore, something even stranger occurred, almost paralyzing me in my momentum. Each time I was completely underwater, I could see about 5 shadows, 5 persons standing on the shore completely immobile, and just watching me, trying to save my life. But every time my head was out of the water, there was not a single soul on land. I decided to ignore the strange occurrence and crawled my way out of the water and looked behind me when I felt safe enough, only to see my boat overturned with no sign of the bed or the mysterious being. What on earth was that thing? I asked myself, glad to be on land, unaware that I could have been the first known casualty of some kind of legend from the area. According to the knowledge I gained, doing subsequent research about my encounter, it bears a name I refuse to mention, and it is said to manifest in, on, or near the waters, by creating sceneries that should not normally occur, like a freaking bed in the middle of a large body of water. Also, touching that bed would have been the end of me. Many did not believe me when I shared my experience, and many disappeared as a result. But at least I tried to warn. So now you also know as well, if you are swimming somewhere during the night and anything seems off, do not try to make sense of it, even if it is in your own swimming pool. Storm out of the water.